Chapter 2748, 2748 Battling a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. 2748 Battling a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. This explained why he hadn't been targeted by heaven and earth. Moreover, pseudo-heavenly venerates naturally couldn't wield the 7 most powerful powers. The problem was, however, that this pseudo-heavenly venerate could rival second-tier heavenly venerates? Had the world been turned upside down? And Jian was also stunned. How is this possible? Thinking carefully about his previous exchange with Ling Han, however, he realized that he had been enraged, and thus had failed to make any observations. Mulling over it now, sure enough, he discovered that Ling Han hadn't used any fundamental power of heaven and earth. This person was powerful in his own right, so much so that he could even rival second-tier heavenly venerates. It can't be, right? Ling Fifan also murmured. Fuck. His grandpa was far too powerful, no? A pseudo-heavenly venerate being able to battle against a second-tier heavenly venerate? This was a never-before-seen accomplishment. A mere pseudo-heavenly venerate dares to challenge me? Yang Jiha bellowed in rage after coming to his senses. Just like the other cultivation tiers, there were also huge gulfs between each minor level in the heavenly venerable tier. Pseudo-heavenly venerates were nothing more than just that, they were far weaker than second-tier heavenly venerates. So what if you're a second-tier heavenly venerate? See how I pummel you. Ling Han said coldly. Today, he would slay a second-tier heavenly venerate for fun. Die. Yang Jiha roared as he launched a powerful attack. He directly unleashed a heavenly venerate technique, with 2 balls of white flames appearing in his hands. With a single sweeping motion, he thrust them toward Ling Han. Yang Xianlong had also unleashed the same technique before, but the 2 balls of flames had only transformed into snakes. Now, however, it was completely different, with the 2 balls of flames transforming into heaven-scorching flames that spread through the sky. Ling Han humphed as he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, causing a golden bell to materialize around him, symbols flashing on its surface. He then charged at Yang Jiha, swinging his fists with fury and ferocity. Pang! 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 Yang Jiha naturally wouldn't back down, choosing to face Ling Han head-on. Heavenly venerates all tempered their bodies with the 7 fundamental powers. The higher their cultivation, the more of these powers they would be able to draw on. First-tier heavenly venerates could only draw on a single power, while second-tier heavenly venerates could draw on 2. This was as clear as could be. Heavenly venerates naturally all possessed powerful body arts, yet because the regulations were capped at the 9th heaven, such abilities could only be used as supportive ones. Yang Jiha's body art was no weaker than that of Ling Han. After all, he was a second-tier heavenly venerate who had already tempered his body with one of the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, he had been at this cultivation level for heaven knew how many epochs. The 2 of them exchanged blows, with each collision causing the space around them to shatter. Countless celestial bodies fell, affecting the entire martial crystalline dimension. Thus, only a few days passed before several other heavenly venerates hurried over. This was an intense battle between heavenly venerates, so how could they dismiss it? There were second-tier heavenly venerates, first-tier heavenly venerates, and also pseudo-heavenly venerates. Even though this was a low-level dimension, it was already infinitesimally close to being a medium-level dimension. Thus, there was a respectable number of heavenly venerates. When they discovered that Yang Jiha's opponent was only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, they couldn't help but gawk in surprise, speechless with shock. How could such a ferocious pseudo-heavenly venerate exist in the world? Brethren, do you know of this person's background? A second-tier heavenly venerate asked Jian. The grandfather of my daughter's future husband? Jian naturally wouldn't say this, so he could only shake his head and reply, I'm not sure either. This was indeed the truth. Apart from Ling Han's name, he didn't know anything else about him. The elites were all extremely curious. At the same time, they also remained slightly on guard. This was because this pseudo-Heavenly Venerate certainly wasn't from their realm. In case he was from the Promised City realm, would he perhaps bring change to the already foregone conclusion? Annihilating the Promised City realm and raising the level of our dimension, thereby allowing us to comprehend the fundamental power of the Genesis world, is an opportunity of a lifetime. We can't let anyone ruin our plans, the elite said. Once Yang Jiha was defeated, they would immediately charge forward to attack. They wouldn't give Ling Han the opportunity to leave alive. Of course, only the second-tier and first-tier Heavenly Venerates would have the right to attack. Even so, the first-tier Heavenly Venerates would still have to team up first lest they wanted to be obliterated in a flash. And Taiyan pondered for a moment before saying, perhaps this person has come from a higher-level dimension. The elites exchanged glances with each other. Even though the neighboring medium-level dimension hadn't invaded them, they had still set up a comprehensive defensive line at the two-realm passageway. Elites constantly guarded this area. Indeed, they should already burn incense to the gods to thank the fact that this higher-level dimension hadn't invaded them. Would they dare to take initiative to launch an attack? Thus, they knew nothing about the neighboring medium-level dimension. Moreover, no one from that dimension had ever traveled over either, with absolutely no communication between the two dimensions. They coexisted in a peaceful manner, with neither side offending the other. Was this person genuinely an elite from the medium-level dimension? This was possible. Because this pseudo-Heavenly Venerate was far too powerful. It was very likely that only higher-level dimensions could raise such a freak. They all became hesitant. If Ling Han were truly a cultivator from that higher-level dimension, did that signify that their neighboring dimension was finally planning to target them? The higher level a dimension, the more numerous and more powerful their elites would be. This was just like how they could suppress the Promised City realm. Moreover, even if that dimension wasn't much more powerful than them, this still meant that they would need to dispatch a large number of elites to battle against them. At that time, could they still engulf the Promised City realm? They all watched on with heavy hearts. Fortunately, there was still the existence of the dimension itself. This was the most powerful weapon. However, it was also because of this that they were still struggling to defeat the Promised City realm. In the skies, Ling Han and Yang Jiha continued to do battle. Ling Han was fighting in an extremely conservative manner, and this was because he was still unclear about his own strength. He needed something to compare it against. After battling for a long time, he was finally able to make an accurate assessment of his own strength. His ordinary battle prowess could roughly reach the peak stage of the second tier. After channeling his Heavenly Venerate techniques, it would naturally increase even further. However, Heavenly Venerate techniques varied, with each being different in might. Thus, it was difficult to say what level he would reach. In fact, this wasn't his full strength. However, limited by his cultivation level, he didn't dare to unleash his full strength. Otherwise, he might accidentally kill himself before even wounding his opponent. That would be as foolish as could be. Ling Han channeled the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll to elevate his battle prowess. He then channeled the 5 Elements Lightning technique. With his current power, he could easily channel 2 Heavenly Venerate techniques. Yang Jiha also responded with Heavenly Venerate techniques. However, he had only mastered a single Heavenly Venerate technique, so he used this to launch a flurry of furious attacks at Ling Han. Even so, it was as if he were being ganged up on by 2 equal-level Heavenly Venerates, and this made him feel immense pressure. Heavenly Venerates were all supreme prodigies, however, so even though Yang Jiha was at a disadvantage, he still remained stubborn and steadfast. In fact, he unleashed brilliant attacks from time to time, threatening to turn the tables on Ling Han. However, it was a shame that Ling Han still possessed a 3rd Heavenly Venerate technique. While channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he would be invincible. Yang Jiha was flabbergasted. Did this person's strength have no limit? He could actually channel 3 Heavenly Venerate techniques at once? Even second-tier Heavenly Venerates would be so exhausted that they would quickly collapse, right? What was the strength of Heavenly Venerates? Apart from their bodies being tempered by fundamental power and their body arts being powerful, their other strength was their ability to wield the fundamental power of heaven and earth. It was because of this that Heavenly Venerates could genuinely channel Heavenly Venerate techniques. Even so, there would eventually come a point where they ran out of energy. Ling Han's energy consumption was far too abnormal. As a Heavenly Venerate, Yang Jiha naturally wouldn't lack strong conviction and willpower. He gritted his teeth and persisted. However, following the continual depletion of his energy, he became less and less confident. If this continued, he would eventually suffer defeat. Chapter 2749, 2749 The Surrender of a Heavenly Venerate. 2749 The Surrender of a Heavenly Venerate. Yang Jiha was extremely powerful. After all, each Heavenly Venerate was a supreme prodigy. This was especially the case since he was someone who had cultivated to the pinnacle in a low-level dimension. Regardless of whether it was talent, knowledge, or willpower, he had reached the apex. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. He was a freak who had extracted the unique power of heaven knew how many realms. Moreover, he had even fused them together to form a core that endlessly provided him with power. This gave him the right to rival second-tier Heavenly Venerates while still being a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, this power was boundless, and it was as if he were a dimension himself. This was the most terrifying aspect. Boom! 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 Yang Jiha was already giving it his all, yet he was still unable to break free from Ling Han's suppression. Everyone watched on in speechlessness. Was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate about to be defeated? This pseudo-Heavenly Venerate was definitely going to defy the heavens. Sweet Lord, so this is my grandpa? Ling Fifan gasped. He had heard innumerable stories about Ling Han's strength, yet just hearing about them was far too abstract. Moreover, it was entirely possible that those stories had been exaggerated. By the looks of things now, however, those stories hadn't been exaggerated at all. In fact, they had barely described a tenth of Ling Han's freakish power. How could a person be so freakish? Meanwhile, young Xianlong was rendered completely speechless as he glanced at Ling Fifan. He had initially planned to charge forward and capture Ling Fifan once his father achieved victory. He would then brutally humiliate him. Now, however, his dreams had been absolutely crushed. Ling Fifan was indeed weaker than him, yet Ling Han was completely capable of pummeling his father. Thus, if he still dared to act on his impulse, he would truly be asking for a beating. Friends, no matter what, Brother Yang is still someone from our dimension. We can't watch on and allow him to be defeated, can we? A Heavenly Venerate said. His title was Ancestral River, and he was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. Another second-tier Heavenly Venerate nodded in agreement. The internal conflict among them was another matter. Right now, however, this was something that pertained to another dimension, so they had to cooperate. Brethren, what do you say? The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate asked. Counting Yang Jiha as well, they had 4 second-tier Heavenly Venerates on their side. The other 3 were doing battle on the 2-realm battlefield. Antaeon shook his head, saying, there's no need to further exacerbate this conflict. After all, it only started off as a small matter. Indeed, this was only a small conflict between 3 youths. Was there any need to involve so many second-tier Heavenly Venerates? Since Brethren is unwilling to step forward, let the 2 of us resolve this problem instead, the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate said. He then strode forward to join the battle. Another Heavenly Venerate also roared as he soared into the sky. Upon seeing reinforcements, Yang Jiha instantly rediscovered his confidence. At their lofty height, would they still care about the judgment of mere mortals? So what if they ganged up on their opponent? Who dared to disparage them? The three Heavenly Venerates teamed up to attack Ling Han. Ling Han was unfazed. His strength came from his own body, so he was confident in his invincibility. Let's battle it out. He continued to channel the three Heavenly Venerate techniques, with the core in his body funneling power into him and allowing him to continue the high-intensity battle. However, the three Heavenly Venerates were no pushovers either, and they were completely able to rival Ling Han after teaming up. The battle continued for a month, yet it was still impossible to decide a victor. Friends, hear me out, would you? Why don't you all stop for a moment? Jian said. The ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the others all nodded in their minds. Ling Han's strength was seemingly infinite, and they couldn't see any hope of suppressing or defeating him. Thus, they were better off ending the battle now. However, Ling Han was unwilling to accept this. After all, Yang Jiehe had wanted to kill his grandson. Ignoring the ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the four knights Heavenly Venerate, Ling Han continued to furiously attack Yang Jiehe. You! The ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the four knights Heavenly Venerate were both infuriated. They had already stopped, yet Ling Han was still shamelessly continuing. They had no option but to rejoin the battle. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. The battle between the four Heavenly Venerates was intense and chaotic. However, the ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the others couldn't compare to Ling Han, who had a power core in his body that endlessly provided him with strength. They were indeed powerful, yet there would eventually come a point where their energy was exhausted. However, there were 3 of them, so it was entirely possible for 2 of them to battle against Ling Han while the third stood aside to rest. In fact, they only needed a short moment. Heavenly Venerates could forcefully extract the power of heaven and earth simply by opening their mouths and breathing. In just a few breaths, they could recover to their peak state. This was also the reason why Ling Han had been able to battle against Wu Haoyang for hundreds of thousands of years. Their recovery ability was far too quick. If this continued, they might never determine a victor. As the battle dragged on, the ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the others became increasingly anxious. Right now, they were invading the Promised City realm, so elites like them couldn't leave the front lines for an extended period of time. Yet, 3 second-tier Heavenly Venerates had been caught up here, so the situation on the front lines was becoming increasingly dangerous. The Promised City realm was indeed weaker than the martial crystalline realm, but not by very much. Friend, what condition do you have to stop? The ancestral river Heavenly Venerate asked, finally yielding to his opponent. In his eyes, nothing was more important than defeating the Promised City realm. Give me Yang Jiehe's head. Ling Han said. Impossible. To say nothing to Yang Jiehe, even the ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the others couldn't agree to this. Second-tier Heavenly Venerates were the most powerful beings of the martial crystalline realm, so they definitely couldn't sacrifice one of them. Then the only option is to battle. Ling Han said coldly. You're taking things too far, the 3 Heavenly Venerates roared in fury. They all retrieved their Heavenly Venerate tools. Wang, wang, wang. 3 columns of brilliant light soared into the sky. These 3 Heavenly Venerate tools consisted of a sword, a broadsword, and a spear. With these Heavenly Venerate tools in hand, the battle prowess of the 3 Heavenly Venerates instantly soared. Ling Han didn't hold back either, retrieving his divine demon sword, whose might astonished the 9 heavens. The 4 of them continued to do battle, with the 3 Heavenly Venerates already gaining an advantage. However, it was still impossible for them to suppress Ling Han. After battling for another 10 years, even Jian couldn't watch on any longer. He flew into the sky, and said, Ling Han, that's enough. Otherwise, I'll have to step in as well. They all shared a common goal, and that was to defeat the Promised City realm. When that dimension collapsed, they would then share the huge opportunity that presented itself. Ling Han also knew that he couldn't possibly kill Yang Jihe with so many Heavenly Venerates opposing him. In fact, his failure was guaranteed as soon as Yang Jihe decided to flee. It wasn't that easy to kill a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. He pondered for a moment before replying, "Fine, then tell Yang Jihe to apologize to my grandson. I'll temporarily forgive him after that." Gasp. Telling a paramount Heavenly Venerate to apologize to a mere celestial king? And only forgiving the former temporarily? Yang Jihe almost went wild with rage. So what if he decided to slaughter 10,000 ninth heaven celestial kings? Who dared to reprimand him? Now, he had only attempted to kill a single celestial king, and he had more so failed at that, yet Ling Han actually wanted him to apologize? Ling Han spread his hands, and said, "Don't want to? Then let's keep fighting. I don't mind at all. Brother Yang." The ancestral river Heavenly Venerate and the others looked toward Yang Jihe, and said, "Please understand the priorities." Since Ling Han had already taken a step back, it was now Yang Jihe's turn to concede. After all, they each needed to make a concession to resolve this problem, no? The four knights Heavenly Venerate and Entian looked at him as well, and it was as if their expressions were saying, "If you don't agree, then we'll step in and help you agree." Yang Jihe naturally couldn't die. However, he also couldn't act on his own whim. No matter what, defeating the Promise City realm was still the most important task at hand. "Fine," Yang Jihe said, the veins on his forehead bulging. He had no option but to bow his head unless he wanted to have a falling out with the other Heavenly Venerates. Chapter 2750, 2750 Ceasefire. 2750 Ceasefire. Yang Jihe descended to the ground, stopping before Ling Fifan, and saying, "I shouldn't have developed killing intent against you." Ling Fifan picked his ears, and said, "Come again? That's an apology? I don't accept it." He waved his hand with a righteous expression. Ling Han had the upper hand now, so Ling Fifan naturally needed to take advantage of it. What a joke! Just because he was weaker, he deserved to be flattened and stomped on? He was also a person. And Xiaoer's eyes instantly glimmered with intoxication. This was the pride and domineering aura of her lover that she adored. "Keep posturing, why don't you?" everyone said in their minds. At the same time, they were also incredibly envious of Ling Fifan. To have a second-tier Heavenly Venerate bow his head and apologize even just as a formality was still something that he could brag about forever. Ling Han stood beside Ling Fifan with a smile, and said, "I also don't feel like that was an apology." "What? You think our Ling clan is easy to pick on?" A cold glint appeared in his eyes. He was still a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, so when he became a true Heavenly Venerate, killing second-tier Heavenly Venerates would be as easy as a wave of his hand. Yang Jihe's heart jolted. He could indeed belittle Ling Han right now. However, the latter was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate at this moment. What would happen when he advanced? Even if all 7 of the second-tier Heavenly Venerates here teamed up, would they be powerful enough to stop Ling Han? There were only 2 ways to deal with such a freak: kill him before he became invincible, or genuinely bow one's head and resolve any animosity. With this in mind, he eventually heaved a sigh. I was indeed in the wrong. I shouldn't have developed killing intent toward this young friend. Please accept my apology. As he said this, he retrieved a spatial god tool and handed it to Ling Fifan, saying, "Treat this as compensation. Hopefully, it can soothe your anger." Not only was he apologizing, but he was even giving compensation. As a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, he was genuinely lowering his status as much as he could. Ling Fifan looked toward Ling Han. Upon seeing him nod, he accepted the spatial god tool with a smile, and said, "Senior, you're truly being too generous. If you ever need me in the future, just give me a yell." Of course, that's as long as you compensate me each time. He used his divine sense to observe the spatial god tool, finding that it was indeed filled with an astonishing amount of treasures. Yang Jihe was truly pissed off at this moment, as this was the betrothal gift that he had prepared for the Yin clan. Thus, even with his wealth, he couldn't scrape together many such gifts. How many more times did Ling Fifan want to receive compensation? "Friend Ling, and other friends, come on over and take a seat," and Tian said in invitation. After so many years, the reconstruction of the Yin clan residence was naturally complete. Ling Han and the 4 second-tier Heavenly Venerates all entered the Yin clan. Some of the first-tier Heavenly Venerates also walked over, wanting to listen to the conversation. After all, if the 5 super elites discussed cultivation, they might have the opportunity to comprehend something new. "Friend Ling, where are you from?" The 4 Knights Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but ask this after taking a seat in the guest hall. Just what sort of place had raised such a freak? "The Celestial Realm," Ling Han replied with a smile. He didn't conceal the truth. Celestial Realm? The Heavenly Venerates were all at a loss. They had never heard of this place before. Ling Han offered an explanation, telling them that the Celestial Realm was the youngest and most recently born dimension of the Genesis world. At the very least, this would be true until a 2-realm passageway formed between the Celestial Realm and the dimension after it. "Super low-level dimension," the Heavenly Venerates exclaimed in shock. Such a realm could produce a freak such as Ling Han? Was that truly a super low-level dimension? Ling Han recounted his experience of going to the transcendent dimension, and he described to them the atmosphere of that vast heaven and earth. At the same time, he also hung a grave threat over their heads. After hearing about the existence of hysteria, the Heavenly Venerates all wore grave expressions. They were racking their brains for ways to annihilate the Promise City realm so that they could use this opportunity to raise their cultivation. By the looks of things now, however, it was as if they were fighting with someone else on the edge of a volcanic crater. Regardless of who won, as long as the volcano erupted, they would both be disintegrated into dust. "I urge you to end this pointless battle and head to the Flaming Frost Realm to fight against Hysteria's invasion. Otherwise, once Hysteria makes its way in, the entire world will be finished," Ling Han said. Moreover, the Flaming Frost Realm is a transcendent dimension, making it possible to reach the 7th tier. This is the destination that we should all strive toward. Everyone hesitated after hearing this. Conquering the Promise City realm had been their dream for generation after generation. Countless prodigies with unlimited potential had died for this cause, as had countless supreme elites. Now, however, they were being urged to end the battle just like that? And amicably join hands to face hysteria? How could they accept this? Ling Han chuckled, and continued, "If I hadn't come across this, then that would have been it. However, since I've become aware of the internal battle going on here, it's my responsibility to step in. Only 2 options sit before you. End the battle, or I'll join the Promise City realm. With my support, do you think you can still defeat the Promise City realm?" Gasp! Everyone gasped upon hearing this, and they couldn't help but feel like Ling Han was being extremely unscrupulous. He was actually using this to threaten them. However, this was also extremely effective. Just then, even a team of 3 second-tier Heavenly Venerates had failed to suppress Ling Han. As such, him joining the Promise City realm might not necessarily turn the tables for them, but it would at least mitigate their disadvantage. The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but ask, "Friend Ling, this battle doesn't involve you, so why insist on becoming a foe?" Ling Han shook his head, saying, "You guys haven't been to the realm battlefield, so you don't understand the brutality of that place. Right now, the most critically important task is to resist Hysteria's invasion. Otherwise, how can a destroyed nest protect its eggs? What does it matter even if you become 3rd tier or 4th tier Heavenly Venerates? You'll still suffer the fate of being crushed into scraps." Everyone fell silent. However, no one questioned the veracity of Ling Han's words by thinking that he had made hysteria up to frighten them. That would be far beneath him. "Allow us a moment to consider this," the Heavenly Venerate said. This matter was far too important, so none of them could make up their minds on a whim. The others all took their leave, while Ling Han remained with Entaian to discuss the wedding between Ling Fifan and Enshior. The two youths were already in love anyway, and now their backgrounds were more so well-matched in status. Thus, their marriage was naturally agreed upon very quickly. They weren't in a hurry to get married, as Ling Han needed to first go to the Promised City realm to bring Ling Jianxue and his wife over. Moreover, he still needed to end the war between the two dimensions. Ling Han set off with Ling Fifan, heading toward the two-realm passageway. His speed was now astonishing, so it only took him a few days to reach his destination. This place was very similar to the celestial realm, with an army encampment keeping guard and a large number of cultivators present to train themselves. Ling Fifan had traveled through many dimensions with his parents, so he had long since become accustomed to acclimatizing himself to the regulations of each world. Meanwhile, Ling Han more so didn't need to worry about this. He had created a power core for himself, so things would be the same for him no matter where he went. His strength came from within. Thus, when they arrived at the two-realm passageway, their battle prowess wasn't affected in the least. They entered the passageway without any difficulties, and it would be impossible for others to notice anything amiss about them. Thus, they naturally weren't stopped by anyone as they started to travel between the dimensions. After some effort, they passed the most chaotic area of the two-realm passageway, and arrived at the Promised City realm. Here, they also didn't attract the attention of anyone. It was as if they were native to this world. Ling Fifan led the way, bringing Ling Han to the army encampment to look for Ling Jianxue and his wife. Ling Fifan, the people in the encampment exclaimed in deep shock upon seeing Ling Fifan. After all, many of them had seen him being defeated and captured. How had he suddenly returned? Chapter 2751, 2751 Smeared. 2751 Smeared. Ling Fifan, how did you come back? Exactly, weren't you captured? How did you come back? Everyone asked this in curiosity. Before Ling Fifan could even answer, he saw a young man pushing his way through the crowd and making his way over, saying, "Ling Fifan, did you surrender to the enemy? Is that why they released you back as a spy?" Upon hearing this, a wave of commotion spread through the crowd. Ling Fifan was infuriated, and he shouted, "Jian, don't you dare smear me. Heh, your family isn't from our dimension, so it won't be a surprise if you guys surrender and betray us," the young man scoffed. This person was called Jian. As for why he was targeting Ling Fifan, the reason for this was simple. This was because a girl that he liked had extremely strong feelings for Ling Fifan. As a result, he always targeted Ling Fifan no matter the situation. This time, the opportunity was even better. As a measly first heaven celestial king, he had actually managed to escape alive after being captured and brought to a foreign dimension. And he hadn't suffered a single wound. He had fled back himself. Who would believe this? There was definitely something fishy about this. "You bastard!" Ling Fifan roared, unleashing his killing intent. This accusation was far too severe. This person was extremely underhanded, and if his smear truly stuck, then it wouldn't only be him who was punished. His parents would be dragged into the mess as well. "What? You want to kill me to keep this a secret?" Jian said, sticking his neck forward. He wasn't afraid of Ling Fifan, as he was also a first heaven celestial king. He was confident that no one at the same cultivation level could defeat him. "Bastard, I'll pummel you to death." Ling Fifan roared as he charged forward and threw a punch at Jian. "Sure enough, you've been shamed enough to erupt in anger now that I've exposed you," Jian said with a cold chuckle. He raised his hands to form a seal before his body, and said, "Hurry, ask the lords to come over. We need to thoroughly interrogate." Pooh! As he was speaking, Ling Fifan's fist also arrived. Ling Fifan's body had already been tempered by Ling Han, so he now possessed a powerful body art. Even if he couldn't compare to the Ling Han of yore, his power was still quite extraordinary. Under this punch, Jiang Yiran's arms were both brutally broken, and he was more so sent flying into the sky. Pang! He flew back, with the dozen or so people behind him acting as human cushions. Only after skidding back a huge distance did they finally grind to a halt. Jiang Yiran was absolutely stunned. Ling Fifan had only been gone for a few years, so how had he suddenly become so powerful? Look at this. Just look at this. You definitely surrendered to the enemy. Otherwise, how could you have become so powerful? He screamed. Channeling his source power, he slowly healed his arms. Are you truly seeking death? Ling Fifan asked in a baleful voice. With Ling Han standing beside him, he was naturally filled with confidence. It was also because of this that he didn't try to explain himself. Are you threatening me? Jiang Yiran said with a loud laugh. Even if you can shut me up, can you shut up the mouths of everyone in the world? He was intent on smearing Ling Fifan as much as he could. In any case, Ling Fifan's return was far too strange and suspicious to begin with, so it was extremely easy to sling mud and make it stick. Ling Fifan gave a soft shout as he lashed out again, launching another attack at Jiang Yiran. Pang! 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 In just a few strikes, Jiang Yiran already became as disheveled as could be. Before a combination of body art and regulations, how could he possibly resist? Ling Fifan, that's enough. Exactly. There's genuinely a lot you need to explain. The others couldn't watch on any longer, and they all stepped forward to stop Ling Fifan. Ling Fifan flew into a rage, and he shouted, "He's been smearing me this entire time, so why did none of you step forward to stop him, huh?" Everyone was rendered speechless. In their minds, however, they all mused that even though Jiang Yiran had taken things too far, his accusations had indeed been aligned with their own doubts. Who's causing trouble in the army camp? A voice that was filled with dignity and might said. They looked over, only to see an elegant man in white appearing, not a speck of dust on his clothes. Many females instantly gazed at him with respect and reverence. This man in white was called Shenbo, and he was a 9th heaven celestial king. There were few heavenly venerates in this low-level dimension, so 9th heaven celestial kings could almost be regarded as the most powerful elites. Thus, he naturally made their hearts flutter. Jiang Yiran hurriedly clasped his hands, and said, "My respects to Lord Shen." Ling Fifan also stopped his attacks, saying, "Lord Shen." Shenbo raised his hand slightly before looking at Ling Fifan in surprise, and saying, "You're back? What about the other prisoners?" "How would I know?" Ling Fifan said in his mind. Because of his relationship with Xiaofan, he had been directly brought to the Yin clan. Thus, he naturally didn't know about the other situation. He shook his head, and replied, "I don't know." "Why don't you know?" Shenbo said in a stern voice. "How did you escape?" Ling Fifan suppressed his anger, and said, "Since I've already returned, I'll naturally explain everything in detail. However, my parents are still worried about me, so can you allow me to visit them first? If you've defected to the enemy, that's a most serious crime, so how can you still be allowed to visit anyone?" Jiang Yiran interjected. Shenbo wore an expression of displeasure upon hearing this. He was currently speaking, so who had the right to cut him off? However, Jiang Yiran's words were his thoughts as well, so he simply glared at Jiang Yiran, but didn't reprimand him. The actions of I, Ling Fifan, will let down neither heaven and earth nor my own conscience. Ling Fifan said loudly. By treating me like this, are you not afraid of bitterly disappointing me? If you're truly innocent, then what do you have to be afraid of? Shen Bo said sternly. Make haste and explain yourself. Fifen. Right at this moment, two voices sounded in unison, and a man and a woman immediately flew over. Ling Jianxue. Chen Shuangshuang. Father. Mother. Ling Fifen hurriedly called. After he was captured, they had definitely prepared for the worst. Now that they were reunited, they all felt like they had been apart for a lifetime. The three of them were just about to embrace, yet Shen Bo immediately stopped them, and said, You too, your son has very likely committed the crime of defecting to the enemy, so before we understand the situation fully, he needs to undergo interrogation first. Ling Jianxue was enraged upon hearing this. The small family of three had come here to fight for a foreign world, yet they were now being accused of defecting to the enemy? Because of his incandescent rage, Ling Jianxue failed to even notice Ling Han. In any case, Ling Han's hair was still disheveled and his face was still dirty, and it had more so been over an epoch since they had last seen each other. Thus, how would he suspect that this person was his father? Shen Bo, step aside, he said in a baleful voice. It was because he was a righteous person who couldn't stand to see a weaker person being bullied by a stronger person that he had decided to battle for the Promised City realm. In fact, he had stuck to this principle throughout his journey through the numerous dimensions. Now, however, his thankless sacrifice had earned him the accusation of his son being a traitorous defector. How could he accept this? Ling Jianxue, don't tell me you want to get physical with me. Shen Bo said coldly. He was naturally unafraid. And what if we do? Chen Shuangshuang said. She was hot-tempered, and she immediately lashed out at Shen Bo. She had been accepted as a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace back then, so her talent naturally wasn't lacking. After cultivating for an epoch, she had also reached the 9th heaven, giving her the right to oppose Shen Bo. Boom! The two elites became locked in an intense battle, and the surrounding crowd naturally had no option but to scamper. Otherwise, if they were accidentally hit by a wayward shock wave, they would truly suffer a miserable fate. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue seized this opportunity to rush up to Ling Fifen, asking, Fifen, are you okay? Dad, I'm fine, Ling Fifen replied. Only at this moment did Ling Jianxue look toward Ling Han. A sense of familiarity involuntarily welled up in his heart, yet he was unable to immediately put his finger on the reason. Moreover, this was the Promised City realm, so how could he be familiar with anyone here? Chapter 2752, 2752 Attacked on all sides. 2752 Attacked on all sides. Ling Fifen was just about to reveal Ling Han's identity, yet he suddenly felt a tremendous force rush over, causing his chest to ache. This forced him to swallow his words. Brother Lei, Brother Chen, Brother Zhao. Ling Jianxue said with a serious expression. 3 9th Heaven Celestial Kings had come in unison. I want to first congratulate Brother Ling on your son's safe return, Lei Bing said. However, over 3,000 others were captured with him, so why was he able to safely return by himself? This naturally requires an explanation. Ling Jianxue was boiling with anger, and he said, Our family of 3 has been fighting here for several million years, and the contributions that we've made have been clear for everyone to see. Have we not even earned the most basic trust? The human heart is a volatile beast. Who knows? Chen Wangyun said apathetically. He didn't give Ling Jianxue any help. So, please cooperate with us, Brother Ling. If we find no issues after questioning your son carefully, we'll be willing to apologize to Brother Ling and your missus, Zhao Beiyue said with a smile. This was asking for Ling Jianxue and his wife to surrender without putting up a fight. Ling Jianxue was even more enraged. Because of this one thing, the 3 of them were all going to be treated as criminals. Once they were captured, their life and death would fall into the hands of others. As a cultivator, how could he allow this to happen? Since you're all suspicious of us, this place is no longer suitable for us to remain, Ling Jianxue said with a sigh. Shuang, let's go. Whoosh. Chen Shuang immediately returned to Ling Jianxue's side. You want to leave? Shen Bo said in a baleful voice. Perhaps you're feeling guilty? Shen Bo. Have some conscience when you speak. Ling Jianxue said in a deep and solemn voice. He was truly angered at this moment. Facing traitors, what respect do we need to show? Lei Bing said. Let's leave. Ling Jianxue said. Can you leave? Zhao Beiyue said, stepping forward and unleashing an attack at Ling Jianxue and his wife. As for Ling Fifan and Ling Han, they were naturally ignored. After all, one was only a first heaven celestial king, and the other more so looked like a beggar. He didn't look like an elite no matter how they looked at him. Ling Jianxue faced the attack head-on. Peng. The two of them immediately launched into battle. Ling Han purposefully didn't interfere, as he wanted to observe his son's current strength. He immediately nodded in satisfaction. Ling Jianxue hadn't wasted his time roaming so many dimensions. He had continually recultivated using each dimension's unique regulations, and this had allowed him to form an extremely stable foundation. He was only a step away from advancing to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Initially, Ling Jianxue's talent wasn't enough for him to advance to the Heavenly Venerable tier. However, nothing in this world was a certainty, so through his perseverance and effort, he had ultimately transformed the impossible into possible. As expected of his son, Zhao Beiyue was no match for Ling Jianxue, and he immediately fell into a disadvantage after just a few exchanges. Upon seeing this, Lei Bing and Shen Bo both stepped forward to join the battle. With a soft shout, Chen Shuang also joined the battle, assisting her husband. Chen Wangyun was unwilling to be left out, so he also joined in, turning the battle into a 4-on-2. This dimension naturally had more ninth heaven celestial kings than just Lei Bing and the others. Thus, as the battle dragged on, more and more ninth heaven celestial kings appeared. However, none of them joined the battle. Most of them had a strong sense of pride and dignity, rendering them unwilling to join forces with others. Ling Han had intentions of training his son, so he also remained a spectator. Unless they faced perilous danger, he wouldn't step forward to help them. Ling Jianxue was truly an extraordinary cultivator. Even though he wasn't as freakish as Ling Han, and even though he didn't possess a body art, his foundations were truly far too stable. Thus, he was able to take on the 4 elites all by himself. Meanwhile, Chen Shuang acted like an assassin as she danced around them. The cooperation between husband and wife was extremely strong. They were 2 against 4, yet not only were they not at a disadvantage, but they were even showing signs of winning. However, 3 more ninth heaven celestial kings immediately stepped forward to oppose them, joining the ranks attacking Ling Jianxue and his wife. At this moment, Ling Jianxue and his wife immediately showed signs of cracking, falling to a disadvantage. Brother Ling, why struggle in futility? As long as you obediently come with us, we won't hurt the 3 of you. After all, we've seen your contributions with our own eyes, Lei Bing said. Ling Jianxue naturally wouldn't believe his words. Was he trying to trick a 3-year-old child? He finally understood the concept of outsiders necessarily have their ulterior motives. However, it wasn't him with ulterior motives, but rather that these people had never trusted him to begin with. To think that he had fought for them with such loyalty and vigor. Break free, he said to Chen Shuang through his divine sense. If they attracted the attention of a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate or a 1st-tier or 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate, they would no longer have the opportunity to escape. Anyhow, they had a rare treasure on them that could help conceal their aura, so as long as they managed to lose their pursuers, even Heavenly Venerates wouldn't be able to find them. Chen Shuang nodded in agreement, and the two of them suddenly unleashed their trump cards, immediately breaking free from their opponents. It was incredibly difficult for celestial kings to kill fellow celestial kings, especially those at the same cultivation. Right at this moment, they heard a cold humph that slammed down at them like a heavy hammer. Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang shuddered violently as they immediately crashed down from the sky. This was the action of a Heavenly Venerate. Not a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Black clouds gathered overhead, with a gigantic face appearing in its center. Like the thunder god, this person's mouth stuck out, and their chin was like an ape's. Our respects to Lord Vanishing Thunder, everyone cried as they fell to their knees. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate, a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. However, 4 people remained standing: Ling Han and Ling Jianshue's family of 3. Impudence! You dare to remain standing before me, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said in displeasure. He was a newbie Heavenly Venerate, so he cared deeply about the rules and regulations of the cultivation world. This was especially the case when he saw those 9th heaven celestial kings who were previously at the same cultivation as him lowering their heads. This gave him a euphoric feeling. Ling Jianxue remained silent, his expression cold. There was one thing about him that was very similar to Ling Hanhe was also an extremely proud person. It was just that this pride was usually concealed under his warmth and friendliness. So what if I remain standing? Don't regard yourself too highly. After all, didn't you start off as a mere mortal as well? Ling Fifan suddenly said. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. A measly celestial king actually dared to chide a Heavenly Venerate. Was he seeking death? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had already been extremely displeased to begin with, so upon seeing Ling Fifan dare to retort him, he instantly exploded with killing intent. He was indeed a prodigy, but there was no rule saying that prodigies needed to be generous and open-minded. He immediately lashed out. Boom! A large hand slammed down from the clouds, surrounded by a sea of blue lightning as it rushed toward Ling Fifan. Heavenly Venerates didn't need to have any reservations. If they saw something they didn't like, they could immediately lash out to crush it. Boom! The large hand landed, with even heaven and earth shuddering under its might. Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang both despaired. They were being suppressed by the might of the Heavenly Venerate, so how could they possibly rush over to help their child? However, Ling Fifan remained fearless, and he remained glaring at the sky, refusing to bow his head. He was naturally filled with confidence. Ling Han had defeated even second-tier Heavenly Venerates, so what harm could a first-tier Heavenly Venerate cause? Pang! The large hand landed, yet it was blocked by another hand, rendering it unable to slam into the ground. Everyone's gaze was instantly drawn to Ling Han. This is a Heavenly Venerate from the martial crystalline realm, they immediately exclaimed. This dimension definitely didn't have such a Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, he had arrived together with Ling Fifan from the martial crystalline realm, so what else could he be but a Heavenly Venerate from that realm? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate faltered upon seeing this. However, he immediately sneered, and said, even if you're a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, you'll still be nothing more than a first-tier Heavenly Venerate after arriving in this dimension. Taking into account the suppression from heaven and earth, you aren't necessarily powerful enough to rival me. Second-tier Heavenly Venerates had definitely comprehended the unique power of a dimension and one of the fundamental powers of the Genesis world. However, after traveling to another dimension, they would no longer be able to wield the former power, the one cultivated during the first tier. Thus, after traveling to another dimension, second-tier Heavenly Venerates could only be regarded as first-tier Heavenly Venerates. Chapter 2753, 2753 Father and Son Reunited. 2753 Father and Son Reunited. First-tier Heavenly Venerates were no match for second-tier Heavenly Venerates. Not only did they have mastery of one fundamental power less, but they were also limited by the fact that the unique power of a dimension couldn't possibly surpass the fundamental powers of the Genesis world. However, after traveling to another dimension, the unique power of the dimensions would only remain in the Heavenly Venerate's body. Every bit consumed was every bit gone. This was similar to the situation faced by celestial kings. Thus, second-tier Heavenly Venerates would quickly drop down to the first tier. Add to that the suppression of a foreign dimension, and it was entirely possible that foreign second-tier Heavenly Venerates would become even weaker than indigenous first-tier Heavenly Venerates. If this hadn't been the case, wouldn't it have been much easier for higher-level dimensions to conquer lower-level dimensions? Ling Han smiled faintly as he retracted his hand, and said, "If you're not afraid of death, then come try me." The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate hesitated upon hearing this. He refused to believe that someone who could become a Heavenly Venerate was a fool. Thus, daring to come here alone, this person was definitely confident in his own abilities, or had some other source of confidence. Perhaps, the martial crystalline realm was about to launch a large-scale attack? So they sent a Heavenly Venerate over to clear the path? He hurriedly sent a signal. No matter what, being careful was his top priority. "Who are you? Do you dare tell me your name?" the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said solemnly. This was also the point of everyone else's curiosity. How could elites, especially Heavenly Venerable tier elites, appear out of thin air? Ling Jianxue had been staring at Ling Han the entire time, and at this moment, his eyes suddenly lit up. His expression became as moved as could be. This was Ling Han. Ling Han, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate repeated in confusion. He had never heard of such a person before. However, he immediately pushed this out of his mind, and said, "Regardless of who you are, I suggest you stand aside." "Father!" Ling Jianxue exclaimed. He finally understood why his son was able to return it was because Ling Han had helped him. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate immediately realized that he had misspoken. Just then, he had even told this person to stand aside. Fuck. His son was about to be killed, so how could he endure and not step forward? "So we truly didn't accuse you wrongly. You're genuinely spies from the martial crystalline realm," he said. If this hadn't been the case, why would Ling Han and Ling Fifan have returned from the martial crystalline realm? Ling Han made a pressing motion with his hand, causing an overwhelming power to surge into the surroundings. The pressure crushing down on Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang immediately disappeared, allowing them to stand back up. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "You finally know that I'm your father, huh? Why were you always mucking around outside back then? Otherwise, he would have wanted to bring his son to the Flaming Frost realm." Ling Jianxue awkwardly ran his hand through his hair. "You guys," the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate roared. They were taking things much too far. Were they treating him, a Heavenly Venerate, as nothing more than a prop? He lashed out in fury. Boom! Howling winds surged at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand and blocked all of these attacks. At the same time, he let Hellion Xuanxue exit the celestial guest residence so that she could reunite with their son. This reunion between mother and son was naturally filled with emotion, with tears brimming in Hellion Xuanxue's eyes. She had truly missed her son. Meanwhile, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate continued to launch a flurry of furious attacks. After a dozen or so seconds, however, he stopped his attacks in astonishment. Ling Han was merely holding a single hand in the sky, yet he was able to easily block all of his attacks. Just how terrifying was his strength? Thoughts of retreat crept into his mind. At the very least, he couldn't face Ling Han by himself. What courage! You actually dared to charge over all by yourself. A voice said coldly. A figure appeared over the horizon, arriving in just a single stride. They stood in mid-air. This was a young-looking man, though there was a single silver horn on his head. He radiated with an astonishing aura. Everyone once again kneeled, and said, "Our respects to Lord Mysterious Horn." This was naturally another Heavenly Venerate, the Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate. He was also at the first tier. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate instantly rediscovered his courage. After arriving here, a second-tier Heavenly Venerate from the martial crystalline realm would inevitably decline to the first tier. Thus, what did it matter even if Ling Han were slightly stronger than him? If the two of them teamed up, they would be more than powerful enough to deal with him. "Very well, your family has finally reunited, so why don't you rest here for all eternity?" he roared. Ling Han's gaze became cold. "By the looks of it, you truly want to die. Enough with your arrogance. Right now, you're also nothing but a first-tier Heavenly Venerate," the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said in disdain. Ling Han reached over to grab at the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. "Since you've come here, you have no option but to lay down even if you're a dragon," the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate roared as he charged forward without fear. Pang! The two of them exchanged a blow, and the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate's arrogant expression instantly underwent a drastic change as if he had seen a ghost. With a shudder, a plume of blood instantly exploded from his entire body like a fine mist. He was almost smacked to death. How was this possible? He was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. Even if he were weaker than a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, with the suppression of heaven and earth, this result should have been impossible. The Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate was also deeply stunned as he looked at Ling Han. He hurriedly unleashed a divine sense fluctuation to request more reinforcements. Ling Han ignored the Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate as he unleashed another palm strike at the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate gritted his teeth as he defended with all his might, also responding with an attack of his own. This was the Promised City realm, this was his home ground. Thus, as long as he could endure for a while, reinforcements would quickly arrive. However, Ling Han had already developed killing intent, so how could his opponent withstand these attacks so easily? Pang! A single palm strike was like an entire world collapsing, with a profound power bearing down on the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate and forcing him to sprawl over the ground. Under the watchful gazes of everyone, a paramount Heavenly Venerate was smacked into the ground with a single strike. What face did he still have? Ling Han's expression was cold as he said, "Is my son someone that you can humiliate?" Upon his arrival, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had immediately used his Heavenly Venerable tier might to smash Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang into the ground. At that time, with training them in mind, Ling Han hadn't stepped forward to help them. However, this didn't mean that he would forget and forgive. One had to realize that his family was his bottom line. Whoever dared to harm them would die. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate lay sprawled on the ground, unable to move even a single finger. The gulf between them was such that it seemed like a second-tier Heavenly Venerate was bullying a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. As the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate lay on the ground, he could see the peculiar gazes of everyone in the surroundings resting on him. This made him feel so humiliated that he wanted to die. He was a Heavenly Venerate. Someone that even the heavens had to venerate. Just how paramount was his status? Before he could even finish this thought, he saw that Ling Han had already raised his foot, and was about to stomp down on his head. The color drained from his face in terror. Lying sprawled on the ground was already embarrassing enough, so if he were further stomped with a foot, would he still have the face to see others in the future? "You dare," the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate roared. Pa! Ling Han's foot stomped on his face, not missing the opportunity to twist around twice. Why wouldn't he dare? Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang were filled with emotion and gratitude. Ling Han was venting anger for them. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue's blood boiled with excitement. He also wanted to possess boundless strength like Ling Han. If anyone dared to offend him, he would resolutely sentence them to death. He would deal with everything right there and then. "Friend, that's quite enough," a composed voice said. An elderly man with white hair walked over. He was tall and solidly built, with his face a healthy red and his white hair tied with a rope made from hemp. There was even a gourd hanging by his waist, making him exude an aura of age and antique. "Spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate," everyone said as they once again kneeled. In fact, even the mysterious horn Heavenly Venerate bowed slightly, saying, "Greetings to Lord Spiritual Gourd." This was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. "Oh? He wanted to kill my son, so why should I release him?" Ling Han asked as he kept his foot on the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate's face. He didn't show any signs of wanting to lift his foot. "Because that's my command," the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate replied, a terrifying aura immediately erupting from his body. Boom! Like the tumultuous sea, this was a formidable aura that caused even the first-tier Heavenly Venerates to shake. Chapter 2754, 2754 killed. 2754 killed. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was very domineering. "I have said so, so that is the heaven, that is the earth, and that is the law." Ling Han smiled slightly. "Unfortunately, you are not yet qualified for that." He lowered his head and looked at the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate beneath his foot, asking, "Let me ask you. Do you have any regrets?" In full public like this, even if the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate felt reservations, there was no way that he would show weakness. Immediately, he raised his head high, and declared, "Whatever I do, I feel no guilt towards heaven and earth, so what regrets would I have?" "Very good." Ling Han nodded, and then raised his foot. Everyone thought that he would be letting him go, and gave an "oh" mentally. After all, this was the Promise City realm. No matter how fierce the dragon passing through was, they would have to be wary of the local tyrant. Pa! But they had not even finished this thought when they saw Ling Han's foot had already descended, directly stomping the head of the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate into mush. Fuck! 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 That was a Heavenly Venerate, and his head had actually been destroyed. Everyone watched with wide eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. However, Heavenly Venerates were too strong. Even if his mind had shattered, he had not died yet. Instead, a soul flew out, turning into a sphere of light. This light sphere was flickering with lightning, revealing the face of the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate. He glared harshly at Ling Han, his eyes filled with fury and venom. For Heavenly Venerates, the physical body was extremely important because they extracted the power to temper their physical bodies. Without the support of a physical body, the soul was a fish out of water, and was incredibly weak. Of course, if he snatched another body for himself, it was not impossible for him to cultivate again to Heavenly Venerable tier, but that would definitely require an endless amount of time. How dare you! The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was enraged. Ling Han actually dared kill in front of him. Just what great and brazen insolence was this? What did he take him for? What would I not dare? Ling Han continued to move, grabbing out towards the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate. Since he had declared that he would kill him, there was no way he would give up halfway. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate naturally could not tolerate this. Immediately, he charged out, wanting to rescue the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate. Allowing Ling Han to commit a crime once was already extremely embarrassing for him, so how could he allow Ling Han to commit another offense? Boom! The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han, his blow bearing an incomparably vast and powerful might. Ling Han was unafraid, and met the incoming attack with a punch. The two great elites exchanged blows once, which instantly created a shock wave that seemed capable of destroying worlds. Pung, pung, pung. Everyone around them were involuntarily sent flying. The most unfortunate among them had to be the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. Initially, he had naturally had no fear of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate level shock wave, but now he was only left with a soul, which was incredibly fragile. This was his fate. He hurriedly extracted the power of heaven and earth, forming a defensive barrier in front of him. Drawing on the power of heaven and earth was naturally no issue for him. Pung! He was too close to them, and his defense was actually shattered by this shock wave directly. As the aftermath surged, his soul was also ripped, and the pain could not be described. If it was not for the fact that he no longer had a physical body, he would definitely be throwing up copious amounts of blood by now. Wyu, the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate paled in great shock. He hurriedly retreated over 50 kilometers away, his eyes set on Ling Han, filled with astonishment and terror. That was because he had discovered that Ling Han had not drawn on the power of heaven and earth at all. There were three possibilities for this. Firstly, Ling Han was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate from another dimension, so there was naturally no way he could draw on the unique power of this dimension. Secondly, he was deliberately using only the power of his physical body. The chance of the third possibility being true was completely zero, but it was that Ling Han was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, so there was naturally no way he could draw on the power of heaven and earth. But whatever was the case, his power should be incredibly weaker than that of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. How could it be that the former fought him to a tie with a single strike? In fact, the former even seemed slightly superior in their clash. How could this be understood? Who exactly are you? The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate asked. If the martial crystalline realm had had this kind of freak, what need would there have been for them to slowly progress with their invasion? They could completely unleash a full invasion. Quang! Right at this moment, a reaction came from the heaven and earth, striking madly at the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, and Ling Han, on the other hand, was completely fine. Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's mouth was wide, looking like he had seen a ghost. It was not that he had not considered this possibility, but the chance of this was close to zero in his mind. Wasn't it a joke for a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate to be capable of matching a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? Was there anything even more exaggerated than this in this world? But the heaven and earth had targeted him, and ignored Ling Han completely, so wasn't this the best proof? Beneath them, a commotion had also risen among the crowd. How could they believe this? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate was filled with even more disbelief. If it was true that his physical body had been destroyed by a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, then wouldn't he become the greatest joke in all history? Ling Han did not answer. Xiao. His figure moved, and he continued his charge towards the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. He was going to establish his might. Stop! The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate hurriedly pounced towards him. Whether it was for his own reputation, or for the sake of the dimension, he naturally could not let Ling Han kill a Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, ignoring the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate completely. He was hell-bent on attacking the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate tried all means to stop him, but his strength was not superior to Ling Han's in the first place, especially when mistakes would be made during an extensive period of defense. Even if he blocked 1,000, 10,000 blows from Ling Han, as long as even one blow made it through and landed, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate would definitely be killed. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was very gloomy in this battle. He had never been so tired, and he felt as if he had power, but it could not be used the way he wanted. Even if he continuously saved the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate, the latter was still severely wounded, his soul being torn many times, and endlessly became weaker. If things went on like this, it would not take too long before the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate would die. No. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's eyes turned, setting on Ling Jianxue and the others. Since you can attack the weaker person, I naturally can as well. They could just hold hostages over each other so that the other party would not hurt the hostage that they had captured. This thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately pounced towards Ling Jianxue and the others. Ling Han humphed. You wish to die as well? His figure turned, and set off in pursuit of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. However, with a wave of his right hand, a cold light surged out, shooting towards the soul of the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had just sighed in relief. He had not expected that Ling Han would actually strike a blow against him now, scaring him so much that he hurriedly drew on the power of heaven and earth to defend himself. This time, there was no spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate to help him out of the crisis, so he had to do it himself. Pooh! Yet, the defensive shield formed from the power of heaven and earth was completely useless against this cold strike, and a sword was seen piercing towards him. A Heavenly Venerate tool. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate exclaimed inwardly. He was a newly promoted Heavenly Venerate, and had not yet forged his own Heavenly Venerate tool. Otherwise, he would have used it long ago. He had just barely finished the thought when the stab from the divine demon's sword reached him. The soul was extremely fragile in the first place, so how could it possibly withstand the sharpness of a Heavenly Venerate tool? His soul was immediately pierced through. Under the calamitous destructive power of a Heavenly Venerate tool, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate's soul was immediately destroyed. He released a wave of dimension power, which instantly spread throughout this entire dimension. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had died. There was no empathetic grief from the heaven and earth or any shower of blood. Heavenly Venerates were not under the control of the heaven and earth. Rather, they were hated and envied by the heaven and earth, so there were naturally no unnatural phenomena to be seen. Ling Han had already come close. He threw a punch, and the 5 elements lightning technique channeled, blasting towards the back of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate could not ignore this. If he was struck by Ling Han with a Heavenly Venerate technique, his physical body might immediately crumble, just like the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. He turned around. Pung! He sent out a palm strike, parrying this punch from Ling Han. However, Ling Han's steps took an abrupt turn, and he immediately appeared in front of Ling Jianxue, Helian Xuanxue, and the others. With a wave of his hand, he instantly took all 4 of them into the celestial guest residence. Then, he turned around, and faced the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2755, 2755 Arrival of Heavenly Venerates. 2755 Arrival of Heavenly Venerates. Everyone was captivated and rendered completely speechless. Ling Han had killed the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate with a single strike, and managed to withdraw to stop the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, saving Ling Jianxue and the others. Just how strong could this man be? You are good. Very good. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate set his eyes on Ling Han. He was really enraged now. Ling Han smiled slightly, and with a beckoning gesture of his hand, the divine demon sword automatically flew back to him. He said, I am actually a very nice guy. As long as no one touches my bottom line, I will not kill anyone. If someone wanted to kill Ling Han, he might only smile calmly in response, and just say, come on, then. I will kill you with a single punch. He would not deign to settle the matter in advance at all. However, if someone wanted to touch his family and friends, he would take the initiative to attack, and destroy this hidden enemy with thunderous force. Such as with the likes of the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate and Shenbo. Ling Han's eyes swept over these people, his gaze seeping with killing intent. He was going to kill all of these people. You still want to commit evil? The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate asked menacingly. If I want to kill anyone, will you be able to stop me? Ling Han asked, smiling. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was speechless. Previously, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had been a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, but he had still been slaughtered by Ling Han. Then, these remaining people were completely defenseless in front of Ling Han. How could he protect them? "You will die," the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate spat out word by word, and when he exclaimed the word die, the jade gourd tied in his hair suddenly fell. Wang! Suddenly, endless brilliance burst out, and an aura that surpassed time and space spread out, causing suffocation. He also summoned his own Heavenly Venerate tool. He was going to become serious now. The jade gourd rose into the air, and continuously grew in size. Furthermore, there seemed to be no end to it, as it covered the skies and hid the sun. Ling Han's hand gripped the divine demon sword, with him standing proudly. He had nothing to fear. Suppress. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate pointed at Ling Han. Wang. The jade gourd immediately spurted out endless light, which turned into an ocean that rushed towards Ling Han. "Do you think I fear you?" Ling Han sneered. He moved with his sword in hand, charging towards the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. As the divine demon sword struck, Ling Han sliced apart all that light, his sharp blade surging forwards. "No matter how freakish you are, ultimately, you are only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate." The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate sneered. He stretched out both hands, grasping the power of heaven and earth, which turned into a long spear that stabbed towards Ling Han. Ding, 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 ding. Ling Han slashed out with his sword, splitting this long spear into countless shards. He forged onwards aggressively, not slowing down in the slightest. His battle prowess was not weaker than his opponent's at all, so how could he possibly be stopped? However, when he approached close enough, the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate maneuvered his precious tool, and a shadowy light surged out of the gourd, and turned into a divine waterfall, preventing Ling Han from continuing forwards. Boom! 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 The two great elites had even summoned their Heavenly Venerate tools, so this naturally was them going all out. They clashed continuously, and then the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's expression became uglier and uglier because he discovered that he was actually no match for Ling Han. The gap between them wasn't very large, but he was really outmatched. He was stunned. Was this really a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate he was fighting? This dimension was a low-level dimension. A second-tier Heavenly Venerate could not fight with his full power for an extended period of time. Otherwise, wouldn't he then be targeted by the heavenly tribulation? And how was this shown? A divine tribulation was just a small token. More importantly, the heaven and earth would cut them off from extracting the power of heaven and earth. If he could not extract the power of heaven and earth, a second-tier Heavenly Venerate could actually only be considered a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Second-tier pseudo-Heavenly Venerate? Thus, it was definite that the longer a Heavenly Venerate fought, the weaker he would become. Of course, this could be solved when they were in a high-level dimension, as the tolerance of the heaven and earth would be greater there. One party became weaker as the battle continued, while the other could maintain the same level without change. Was there any need to even wonder what the result would be? The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was certain that if he wanted to defeat Ling Han, he could only do so with a single crushing, overwhelming blow. Otherwise, his disadvantage would only grow as the battle progressed, right until he himself was defeated. But the problem here was, he was already the strongest elite of this dimension. Suppressing Ling Han could only be done by a third-tier Heavenly Venerate. Could a third-tier Heavenly Venerate be nurtured in a low-level dimension? Then, there was another way to stand against Ling Han, and that was to depend on an advantage in numbers. Before they were targeted by the heaven and earth, they could stop and rest for a moment. That was doable as well. At present it was only him alone, so these were just empty words. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate hurriedly sent out a signal for help. He alone was really unable to stop Ling Han. For the moment, he could still manage to hold up. Ling Han could sense the wave of divine sense from his enemy, but was unconcerned. He was all alone. If he wanted to fight, he could, and if he wanted to flee, he could too. Furthermore, his power originated completely from himself, so he did not have the worries that other heavenly venerates would have. This battle was something that he had deliberately asked for. Otherwise, how would he be able to convince others with mere words? Previously, Tian and the others had listened to Ling Han. What other reason was there aside from the fact that he was strong enough? Otherwise, for a pseudo-heavenly venerate to converse as equals with a second-tier heavenly venerate had to be a joke. Ling Han tossed the spiritual gourd heavenly venerate off his tail. His strength was not enough to kill the latter for the moment, so he would first kill Shen Bo and the others. The spiritual gourd heavenly venerate moved to stop him, but he was completely helpless. Those celestial kings that had attacked Ling Jianxue previously were all slaughtered as Ling Han began a massacre. When he had killed the majority of them, some heavenly venerates finally arrived. There were second-tier heavenly venerates and first-tier heavenly venerates, and there were also a few pseudo-heavenly venerates, making them a total of 9 people. When they saw how the second-tier heavenly venerate was battling intensely with Ling Han, 2 second-tier heavenly venerates immediately released a battle cry, and joined the battle. All elites of the martial crystalline realm were to be killed without mercy. But when they actually fought, they were immediately stunned because Ling Han was overwhelmingly strong. He did not seem like a second-tier heavenly venerate that had come from the other realm at all. This freak is only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but his battle prowess is too extraordinary, the spiritual gourd heavenly venerate explained. What? The other 2 second-tier heavenly venerates could not believe this at all. A mere pseudo-heavenly venerate could really be so strong? But then they recalled the minor details. They were being targeted by the heaven and earth, while Ling Han was completely ignored. Furthermore, Ling Han had not drawn on the power of heaven and earth. If it was said that this was because he regarded them with disdain, and deliberately abstained from using it, this would seem even more impossible, right? Because he was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. How can a pseudo-heavenly venerate be so strong? At the same time that they felt stunned, an endless greed also rose up in them. If they could capture Ling Han, and force out the secret to his strength, then wouldn't they, too, be able to become even more powerful? Take him down, the spiritual gourd heavenly venerate exclaimed. Now that there were 3 great heavenly venerates attacking Ling Han together, they were naturally certain of their victory. Agreed. The other 2 great heavenly venerates nodded. Though Ling Han was inconceivably strong, he had not exceeded their limits. The 4 of them fought fiercely and incredibly intensely. With the combined efforts of 3 great heavenly venerates, they could solve the problem of weariness. They only had to battle for a while and then take a rest on the sidelines, and they would be able to evade the problem of being targeted by the heaven and earth, immediately being revitalized. Ling Han frowned slightly. How long was the battle going to drag out if things continued in this way? With a thought, he turned around and left. You have no escape. The spiritual gourd heavenly venerate and the others hurriedly set off in pursuit. Ling Han led them into the depths of the 2-realm battlefield, which belonged neither to the martial crystalline realm nor to the Promise City realm, but rather could be considered an independent space. When the opportunity came for it, it would truly become a small world of its own, just like when the small world and the foreign realm collided and possess a realm core. After reaching this place, Ling Han no longer fled. Instead, he turned around and confronted them directly. The spiritual gourd and the others dared not be careless either. This was no longer the Promise City realm, where there was the power of heaven and earth to suppress cultivators from another realm. It was possible that elites from the martial crystalline realm could appear at any time. If they were besieged, they could die here. Ling Han released a battle cry, striking madly with the divine demon sword. Pung, pung, pung. They fought intensely again, but the spiritual gourd and the others soon encountered a problem. They could not extract the power of heaven and earth here. Chapter 2756, 2756 Killing a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. 2756 Killing a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. The reason why Heavenly Venerates were so strong was because they could extract the power of heaven and earth for their own use. But the power of heaven and earth could not be extracted here, so Heavenly Venerates would not be that much more powerful than a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. All of us cannot extract the power of heaven and earth, so let's just see who is stronger. Ling Han laughed loudly, unleashing an aggressive counterattack. He had formed his own core of heaven and earth, and he himself could be considered a core of heaven and earth at the same time. His power was unending, so why would he be afraid of a drawn-out battle? The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate and the others knew that it would be disadvantageous for them to fight here, but they coveted the secret to Ling Han's strength, so they were reluctant to just retreat like this. They still continued to attack Ling Han endlessly. But as their power continued to decline, the three of them became more and more agitated. If things continued like this, to say nothing of being unable to deal with Ling Han, it would be they that would be suppressed by Ling Han instead. They hoped for a miracle to happen, that Ling Han's power would suddenly fall drastically, because they did not believe that there was anyone that could be this freakish, possessing endless power. However, a miracle did not happen, and their power was very realistically declining. Retreat. The three great Heavenly Venerates had no choice but to retreat. Otherwise, their battle prowess would fall below the second-tier Heavenly Venerate. By then, how could they possibly be a match for Ling Han? Wanting to flee now, how could it be as easy as that? Ling Han humphed coldly, chasing rapidly after the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. How dare you! The three great Heavenly Venerates moved simultaneously, rushing towards Ling Han. This time, Ling Han was also going all out. Channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he completely ignored the other two great Heavenly Venerates, and merely focused his aggressive attacks on the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, not allowing the latter to have a chance of fleeing back to the Promised City realm. Pung! 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 The battle prowess of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate was truly violent and fierce. One after another, attacks landed on Ling Han, and the latter felt his chest burn terribly, feeling incredible pain. But he still ignored them, and just simply blasted the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. He was determined to detain this man. If he wanted to have the Promised City realm listen to him, he had to establish his might first so that the people here would all calm down and listen to him. A second-tier Heavenly Venerate was an acceptable choice, what more when the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate had actually wanted to make a move on Ling Jianxue and the others previously. If time was slightly rewound, and the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was still in his strongest state, it naturally would be a piece of cake for him to escape. However, because of greed, the three of them had to fight until their power declined enough before they were willing to retreat. Then, with Ling Han blasting him at full power, how would he manage to flee? He would only become weaker and weaker, so how could he possibly match Ling Han? The other two great second-tier Heavenly Venerates had also gone mad. With three Heavenly Venerates fighting at the same time, Ling Han was still able to capture or kill one of them, so how would they have the face to see others in future? The two of them blasted Ling Han continuously, determined to rescue the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. Pooh! Ling Han spat out blood, but the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was similarly throwing up blood. His situation was not very good either. The situation now was very delicate. If the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate could last for a while longer, then it was possible that he could drag out the battle so that Ling Han would be blasted into a state of severe injury, which would naturally resolve the crisis for him, but if Ling Han could last longer than the spiritual gourd, the one who would be collapsing would instead be the latter. Of course, which of those capable of becoming a Heavenly Venerate did not have a strong determination? Whether it was Ling Han or the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, both of them were extremely stubborn. No matter how critical the situation was, they would not lose their fighting spirit either. In this aspect, the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was not inferior to Ling Han in the slightest. But the problem here was that the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's battle prowess was still continuously declining, while Ling Han's battle prowess was not. This made Ling Han's advantage gradually stand out. Each strike landed on the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, causing him to quickly collapse. "You dared make a move on those close to me, die," Ling Han declared coldly. With a strike, Pu, the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's head was suddenly pierced through. "No!" The other two great second-tier Heavenly Venerates exclaimed in shock. In the first place, they were at a disadvantage in the realm war, and now the situation would naturally become even worse with another second-tier Heavenly Venerate killed. Ling Han ignored them completely, stowed the body of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate into his spatial god tool, and then turned and left. The other two great Heavenly Venerates only chased a few steps, and then stopped. While Ling Han had sustained severe injury, he could still fight, but if they pursued him into the martial crystalline realm, that would only be committing suicide. They sighed, shook their heads, and returned. With a second-tier Heavenly Venerate dead, the war would become even tenser. Ling Han did not return immediately to the martial crystalline realm, but rather recuperated from his injuries here. Otherwise, there was no guarantee that Yang Zhihe and the others would not turn the tables on him and attack. It was best to be careful. His injuries were very serious. After all, he had killed the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate while bearing the attacks of two great Heavenly Venerates forcefully. "I am a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, after all. This is where my limit is," Ling Han commented inwardly. However, the fact that he was able to kill one of them, even when he was being besieged by three great second-tier Heavenly Venerates, definitely was a battle merit unprecedented in all of history. "I have basically walked this path up to this point." Ling Han was very satisfied with himself. Next, he would only have to return to the Flaming Frost realm, and master the unique power there, and then he would break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. 7 years later, he had finally completely recovered from his injuries and returned to the martial crystalline realm. "Friend Ling, was your journey smooth?" And Tian personally came out to receive him. Ling Han smiled, sent out all the people in the celestial guest residence, and then replied, "Not too bad. I encountered some minor problems, but they are dealt with." "Oh, what problems?" And Tian asked. Ling Han waved his hand, and two new bodies instantly appeared on the ground. A fearful aura surged out, and the Tuan brothers standing behind Antian instantly paled, trembling uncontrollably. Thankfully, Antian had already unleashed his own aura, protecting his two sons. And Ping Tian and Ping Hai were both astounded. Just what level of elite were these two corpses? How could they have such powerful auras even after death? Antian's eyes swept over them. He saw the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate first, and was only slightly shocked. He knew that this was a newly advanced Heavenly Venerate. However, when he saw the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, his eyes bulged. This was his old foe. Who knew how many times the two of them had fought? Their strength was more or less equal. If he entered into the Promise City realm, he would definitely be slaughtered by the other party, and it was the same the other way round. Yet Ling Han had entered into the Promise City realm, and not only had he not died, he had even aggressively killed two Heavenly Venerates. Just how terrifying was this? "Brother Ling, I am truly impressed." He sighed. Originally, he had addressed Ling Han as Friend Ling Han, and addressed himself respectfully. Though he recognized Ling Han's strength, he still had the pride of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. However, now that the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate, whose strength was equal to his, had been killed by Ling Han, what else was there for him to be proud of? Ling Han smiled. Now that the parents from both sides have arrived, it should be about time to prepare for the wedding, right? Agreed, and Tian agreed readily. For two great heavenly venerates to ally by marriage was naturally a big deal. When they heard the news, not only did celestial kings all arrive to attend the feast, even heavenly venerates were no exceptions. Initially, second-tier heavenly venerates had not wanted to arrive personally because of their lofty status, but when they heard of Ling Han's battle merit, and how even a second-tier heavenly venerate had been slaughtered by his hand, not one of them could sit by calmly, and all appeared personally. The wedding progressed. The new couple would naturally be teased excessively, while Ling Han, Tian, Yang Jihe, and the four knights heavenly venerate discussed matters behind closed doors. After allowing them such a long period of consideration, it was naturally time to hear the replies from these people. If Ling Han had not killed the spiritual gourd heavenly venerate, the people here would only have shaken their heads. How could they be willing to give up the great matter that they had planned for several dozen epochs? But now, they were all nodding with agreement. Chapter 2757, 2757 Son and grandson were beaten. 2757 Son and grandson were beaten. Circumstances prevail over men. Ling Han could kill a second-tier heavenly venerate in another dimension. Such strength was too terrifying. So, it would be better to follow Ling Han to the Flaming Frost realm. They were able to cultivate to the maximum limit in the low-level dimension, so they might not necessarily reach the 7th tier in a transcendent dimension, but there shouldn't be a problem with the 3rd tier and 4th tier. Therefore, they conversed with each other very happily. After the wedding ceremony, Ling Han set off together with Tian and the other second-tier heavenly venerates to the two-realm battlefield. The presence of so many heavenly venerates naturally alarmed the Promise City realm. In the first place, they were already one second-tier heavenly venerate less, so they could only rely on the power of the dimension to suppress them. However, when they heard that Tian and the others took the initiative to say that they wanted to make peace, they were all surprised. This first reaction naturally was that this had to be fake. It was too fake. Their realm really couldn't last any longer, and its destruction was only a matter of time. Now this was nothing more than delivering a huge gift. Why was this so? Ling Han related the matter regarding hysteria, and invited these heavenly venerates to go to the Flaming Frost realm with him. He was very blunt, and directly said that if they didn't accept, then he would join forces with the elites of Martial Crystalline realm to flatten the Promise City realm. This threat indeed carried weight. After all, the spiritual gourd heavenly venerate was killed by Ling Han. After thinking through the matter for a few days, the Promise City realm agreed to Ling Han's proposal. The two realms ceased fighting, and went to the Flaming Frost realm together. Ling Han led the way, and everyone set off. Everyone was bringing their families with them. This Flaming Frost realm was a transcendent dimension, with endless opportunities, so it was naturally a place suitable for the growth of juniors. With a group of people transmigrating through the dimensions, and due to the presence of so many heavenly venerates, it naturally aroused the vigilance of every dimension. Although most of the elites in these medium-level dimensions had gone to Flaming Frost realm, there would always be one or two top-notch elites who stayed behind to keep watch. Ling Han stepped forward to speak, explaining that they didn't have any malicious intentions, they were just passing through to go to the Flaming Frost realm. They passed through smoothly, and transmigrated from one dimension to another. At the same time, Ling Han was paying attention to the mark that he had inscribed to see if there was any response from the Empress. Although the Empress was also a super genius, there was still a gap when compared to him, especially in terms of comprehending the power of the dimension. Due to the exponential increase in difficulty, the gap in the time it would take for them to master the power of the dimension might be 100-fold or even 10,000-fold respectively. Therefore, counting from the Flaming Frost realm, in the 99th dimension, Ling Han finally discovered the imprint of the Empress' divine sense. He proceeded to the core of that dimension, and sure enough, he met the Empress there. The Empress was waiting for him. She had reached her own limits in cultivation, and couldn't accommodate any more power of the dimension. When the two met, they hugged each other excitedly. An epoch was really too long. After deliberately stopping over for a few days, Ling Han finally rejoined everyone, and they set off once again. The battle prowess of the Empress was also very strong. She would be able to completely defeat any first-tier Heavenly Venerate. However, she could not be compared with a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. After all, the power of the dimension which she had mastered was far inferior to that of Ling Han. This was good enough. Obviously, she was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, but was capable of reigning invincible amongst first-tier Heavenly Venerates. Everyone set off again, and after hundreds of thousands of years, they finally arrived at the Flaming Frost Realm. This is a great place. As soon as they arrived, all the Heavenly Venerates were deeply moved. The regulations here were more refined and advanced. After reaching the 9th heaven here, the chances of advancing a step further to become a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate would be much higher. Moreover, the level of heaven and earth here was the highest in the Genesis world. As long as there was a good opportunity and one's talent was good enough, they could become 3rd tier, 4th tier, or even 7th tier Heavenly Venerates. Of course, this was only a theoretical possibility. They were all secretly happy for their decision. It was right for them to come here. The group soon arrived at the world's paramount martial academy. Most of the Heavenly Venerates had to arrange for their descendants and successors to enroll into the martial academy before they could be at ease to proceed to the realm battlefield. Many people were actually not qualified to enter the martial academy, but it didn't matter, as the Heavenly Venerates could lead them through the 9 deaths formation. It was just that they couldn't think of entering and exiting by themselves in the future. There were many such people in the martial academy, such as Huai and so forth. He was acting arrogant in the martial academy just because he had a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate for a father. With so many Heavenly Venerates arriving all at once, the martial academy suddenly became lively. Fortunately, the one keeping watch in the martial academy was a 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate, who was capable enough to suppress all these Heavenly Venerates. Who would dare to mess around? Ling Han didn't bring Ling Jianxue, Ling Fifan, and the others into the martial academy, but intended to let them enter the 9 deaths formation by themselves. Otherwise, so what if they entered the martial academy? Were they there to become profligate young masters? Of course, he had full confidence in his son and grandson, and believed that they would be able to pass the test. True enough, Ling Jianxue and Ling Fifan did not fall short of his expectations. They easily broke through the 9 deaths formation. Even Chen Shuangshuang could only barely pass through, while Ensure lacked aptitude, and could only rely on Ling Fifan. The furor caused by the arrival of the Heavenly Venerates subsided quickly. Not long after, they set off to the realm battlefield, which was an obligation that they needed to fulfill. Ling Han didn't go, as he and the Empress were about to break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Bewitching Maiden Ro came back from outside, and smilingly said to Ling Han, "Husband, do you know that most people now think you are dead? How is it that I am now dead?" Ling Han asked. "There hasn't been any news about you for more than an epoch. Everyone was saying that you had failed in attempting to break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, and became a dead person of the past," Bewitching Maiden Ro said as she pursed her lips and smiled. Ling Han was stunned for a moment, only to realize that he hadn't made an appearance for an epoch, so it was normal to be suspected of being dead. With his freakishness, he should have reached the height of 3rd tier or even 4th tier Heavenly Venerate within hundreds of millions of years, but there had been no news in an epoch, so what else would it be if not him being dead? Ling Han couldn't help feeling curious. What had become of Ji Wuming, Hua Ferong, and the others? They ought to have already become Heavenly Venerates, it was just unknown what heights they had reached at this point. He simply inquired, and found out that Ji Wuming and Hua Ferong had already left the martial academy a long time ago and gone to the realm battlefield. Not only them, but also Yi, Yen Xianlu, and the other prodigies from the celestial realm had gone there. After an epoch had passed, they had all reached the 9th heaven, and were now fighting bloody battles in the realm battlefield in search of opportunities for a breakthrough. As for what happened to them now, Ling Han had no idea. After all, the realm battlefield was too far away, and there were so many prodigies. Even if many of those people had been dead for countless years, no one would know. It would be better to go to the realm battlefield in the future. Ling Han decided to set off with the Empress to find the core of this dimension so as to complete their last step as pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. However, the two of them hadn't yet set off for the journey when Chen Shuangshuang came looking for them. "What's wrong?" Ling Han asked. His daughter-in-law looked worried, as if she had encountered a huge problem. "Did Jianxue bully you?" he asked with a smile. Chen Shuangshuang shook her head, but couldn't help shedding tears. "Both Jianxue and Feifan are injured." Ling Han immediately stood up. Well, he was still here, yet someone dared to bully his son and grandson. He ignored the matter of revenge for the time being, and hurried to the place where both father and son were staying together with Chen Shuangshuang. True enough, both of them were lying down with injuries all over their bodies. Ling Han observed first, and let out a sigh of relief when he found that while the two of them were seriously injured, their lives were not in danger. Both of them had the alchemical pills that he had concocted, and upon consuming them in time, not only would their lives be fine, it would also not have any negative impact on their future advancement in cultivation levels. He breathed a sigh of relief before asking, "What happened?" Chapter 2758, 2758 Settling of Accounts. 2758 Settling of Accounts. Here was the thing. Ling Feifan was a person with a flamboyant personality. He wasn't as suave and steady as Ling Jianxue, he was more like Ling Han, with his abilities being displayed to the full extent, and was more likely to cause trouble. As a matter of fact, he had gotten into a fight with another First Heaven Celestial King because of a trivial matter. The two fought, and the other party lost. In the end, that person turned out to be the younger brother of a 9th Heaven Celestial King, which directly provoked this elite to make a move against him. In the first place, how could a fight with a First Heaven Celestial King draw out an elite of the 9th Heaven? This responsibility had to be borne by Ling Han. The reason was that this 9th Heaven Celestial King was called Yu Wudi. The Yu clan and Ling Han were old enemies, so when Yu Wudi heard that this person was surnamed Ling, he couldn't help but beat up Ling Feifan without so much as an explanation. It stood to reason that it was strictly prohibited for celestial kings of higher cultivation level to make a move against those at a lower cultivation level within the martial academy, unless the gap was within 2 cultivation levels. Yu Wudi dared to do this because his father, the Imperial Void Celestial King, had not only become a Heavenly Venerate, but had also advanced to become a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate. The Imperial Void Celestial King had already been near to becoming a Heavenly Venerate in the Celestial Realm back then, so all he had needed had been more time or perhaps a little chance. After coming to the Flaming Frost Realm, the cultivation environment here was sufficiently conducive, and in addition to that, he had had the time frame of an epoch that had allowed him to take such a step forward. He was extraordinary indeed, and after so many years, he had successfully taken the next step to become a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate. Having his father who had successfully become a Heavenly Venerate, Yu Wudi was certainly able to be arrogant. He had not attained a perfect celestial seed. In fact, this was just a scam, and the chance of him becoming a Heavenly Venerate was extremely slim, so he wanted to become a ruler, acting as an overlord in this place. Just because Ling Feifan was surnamed Ling, Yu Wudi attacked and seriously wounded Ling Feifan, for no other reason than him being unhappy with the surname, though he was actually hitting the right person. When Ling Jianxue found out about it, he went to find Yu Wudi to talk some sense into him, but a fight broke out between them as well. Ling Jianxue wasn't weaker than Yu Wudi. Unfortunately, Yu Wudi had been operating here for many years, and he had many friends who were of ninth heaven. When these people attacked together, Ling Jianxue was naturally defeated, and was also seriously wounded. It was just that simple. Ling Han's expression darkened. Did you would think Ling Han was dead, daring to bully his son and grandson like this? Furthermore, this was you would not having known the father and son relationship between Ling Han and Ling Jianxue, otherwise, he might not have just dealt a heavy blow, but a deadly one. Oh, Ling Han hadn't killed anyone in an epoch, so everyone had forgotten about his existence, right? Fine then, he would go kill someone. Ling Han said to Chen Shuangshuang, take care of the two of them, I'm going to kill someone. Chen Shuangshuang couldn't help but feel moved. She never knew that she would have the urge to shed tears when she heard the words, kill someone. This was the martial academy, after all, with strict rules and regulations, which were set by the Heavenly Venerates. Ling Han, on the other hand, did not hesitate to kill. This was a father's expression of anger and love. The martial academy was a huge place, but to Ling Han, it was actually very small. He took one step after another for 30 minutes, and he swiftly arrived at the peak of the mountain where the abode of Yu Wudi was located. If the martial academy had promptly come forward to severely punish Yu Wudi after Ling Fifan had been beaten, and the matter had been handled fairly, then Ling Han would not have had to break the rules. However, there was still no movement from the martial academy up until now, so Ling Han was outraged. Since the martial academy took no heed of the matter, then this father couldn't be blamed for taking action himself. Ling Han ascended the mountain step by step, and soon arrived on the peak of the mountain. There were guards in front of the abode, and one immediately shouted at Ling Han, "Who are you?" He was a third heaven celestial king, so it was naturally impossible for Ling Han to have any regard for him. However, Ling Han didn't make a habit of killing innocent people indiscriminately, so he said, "Call Yu Wudi out, I want to settle accounts with him." "How dare you?" the third heaven celestial king immediately reprimanded. Ling Han shook his head as he sent out a palm strike, and pressed forward. His palm strike appeared light as a feather, as if there wasn't any force behind it, so the third heaven celestial king was also unafraid, and countered Ling Han with a punch. Pang! He was sent flying as soon as the palm strike made contact, and all the bones in his body were shattered. However, Ling Han was merciful after all, and didn't smash him to death. The power of the strike didn't just stop there, as it blasted the mountain peak with a loud noise, and Yu Wudi's abode was instantly flattened. Xiao, a figure flew out and stood upright in the sky. It was precisely Yu Wudi, with his black hair fluttering in the winds. He bore an extremely angry expression. Someone actually dared to bombard his abode. Wasn't that too outrageously bold of a move? "Who are you?" he shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. "So you don't recognize me?" Yu Wudi stared at Ling Han, and felt that Ling Han looked somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember who he was for a short while. After all, Ling Han had been cultivating hard for the last epoch, which had greatly changed his demeanor and temperament. In addition to that, Yu Wudi thought that Ling Han was dead, so how could he have considered this person to be Ling Han? However, he bore a deep hatred for Ling Han after all. After a few more glances, he couldn't help but gasp, and clenched his teeth as he exclaimed, "Ling Han! You recognize me now?" Ling Han said lightly. "You actually didn't die," Yu Wudi said bitterly. Back then, Yu Wudi had been defeated by Ling Han, and had had to break through to the Celestial King tier ahead of time. Then, after coming to the world's paramount martial academy, Ling Han had created one legend after another, which Yu Wudi could only look up to. It was originally thought that, having made no appearance in one epoch, Ling Han had already died in the process of advancing to the Heavenly Venerable tier, but he unexpectedly reappeared. Ling Han nodded. "Of the two people whom you injured today, one is my son, and the other is my grandson, so I came here to settle accounts with you." Yu Wudi was taken aback for a moment, and then sneered. "If I had known earlier, should have dealt more severe blows. He was very pleased. He had failed to gain the upper hand over Ling Han, but he'd managed to get rid of his enemy's offspring. That was awesome. Too awesome. He looked at Ling Han, with the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Now that they've been beaten, what can you do? Kill you. Ling Han said in a very calm tone. This is the Martial Academy, do you dare to make a move? Yu Wuti was not afraid in the least. Ling Han stopped talking, moved his feet, and walked towards Yu Wuti. You dare. Yu Wuti made a move, and boom, he grabbed a streak of Great Dao and lashed with it towards Ling Han. Pang, the Great Dao hit Ling Han's body, but there was not even the slightest impact. Ling Han stretched out his hand, grabbed Yu Wuti's neck, and lifted him up like a chicken. It was an extremely simple move. Yu Wuti was struggling and moving his limbs about as his face was filled with horror. How could he be so vulnerable in front of Ling Han? Back when Yu Wuti had been on the celestial path, he at least had been able to fight evenly against Ling Han, albeit he had been at a slight disadvantage. As for now, the two of them were not even on the same level at all. You wouldn't dare to kill me. Yu Wuti's face was already flushed, but he was still acting stubborn because he knew that this was the Martial Academy, after all, and Ling Han wouldn't dare to kill him. Naturally, this made him fearless. Take me to find those people who attacked together with you, Ling Han said calmly. Yu Wuti was the main culprit, so there was no doubt he ought to die, but the other people who had wounded his son also couldn't be let off the hook. They had to be severely punished. Dream on. Yu Wuti glared at Ling Han. Ling Han merely clenched his fist, and a terrifying power surged through. Ka, 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 the sound of Yu Wuti's bones breaking could be heard instantly. I'll take you there, Yu Wuti conceded. Chapter 2759, 2759 Great Fury. 2759 Great Fury. Yu Wuti agreed to take Ling Han to find his friends, not just because he could not bear with such torment, but because he wanted Ling Han to walk out so that others could see him. This naturally would alert the authorities of the Martial Academy, and they would send someone to save him. He was certain that Ling Han had to have reached the pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier, or even further than that, and that was why he could take him down with a single blow. A Heavenly Venerate was being a bully, so the Martial Academy would definitely interfere in this matter. Very soon, they arrived at the foot of a mountain. This was where one of Yu Wuti's friends lived. That man's name was Cheng Feiwen, and he was also a 9th Heaven Celestial King, but he did not have a Heavenly Venerable tier elite among his ancestors. This small clique was led by Yu Wuti because only his father was a Heavenly Venerate, and a second-tier Heavenly Venerate at that. Ling Han took out a piece of divine metal, which he directly refined into a chain, and then tied Yu Wuti up with it. He then dragged him up the mountain. There was not just a single abode on this mountain. Thus, the scene of Ling Han dragging Yu Wuti up the mountain was also witnessed by many people. They were all stunned. That was Yu Wuti, a dignified and great 9th Heaven Celestial King who had an old man who was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. Why was he being dragged around as if he was a dead dog? And who was that fierce guy that was dragging around Yu Wuti? Those people that had been in the Martial Academy with Ling Han at the same time had basically already gone to the realm battlefield. It was only a rare few that were still staying here. Hence, no one recognized Ling Han. When had such a freak appeared in the Martial Academy? Yu Wuti felt completely humiliated. Being dragged around in circles inside the Martial Academy, how was he supposed to continue strutting around in the future? As soon as someone mentioned today's matter, he would probably have to escape with his tail between his legs, right? Yu Wuti gritted his teeth. He swore that he would definitely ask his father to step in, and have him blast Ling Han into dust. He screamed in pain. The friction between his body and the ground caused his skin to split apart, and blood flowed copiously behind him. This was because Ling Han had exerted a frightening power on his body, and added with the fact that the ground here had been tempered by Heavenly Venerates before, it was extremely hard. It was like using a millstone to grind soybeans. Even if Wuxia was a ninth heaven celestial king, he could not bear this. Furthermore, his cultivation level had already been sealed off, so there was no way he could use regulations to protect himself. Ling Han did not feel the slightest bit of sympathy. Ever since Wuxia had touched his son and grandson, Ling Han had already sentenced him to death. Ling Han ignored everyone's attention, and proceeded the whole way up the mountain. Everyone was extremely curious, and followed him. At the same time, there were naturally people who reported the situation to the authorities of the Martial Academy. This commotion was quite large. Before Ling Han had dragged his hostage to the summit, the people above had already gotten the news, and all came out. Brother Yu. When he saw how Wuxia was being dragged on the ground, Cheng Feiwen was astonished. What was going on here? So you are Cheng Feiwen? Ling Han asked. How dare you? You actually dare humiliate a disciple of the Martial Academy like this? Cheng Feiwen reprimanded loudly. Within the grounds of the Martial Academy, as long as the difference in cultivation level was no more than 2 cultivation levels, they could attack freely. As long as no one was killed, and no serious injury that could not be healed was inflicted, that was fine. However, being able to wound others did not mean that humiliation would be tolerated. Being like Ling Han, dragging Wuxia around like a dead dog, had indeed surpassed limits. Ling Han nodded, and stretched out a hand to grab Cheng Feiwen. Cheng Feiwen hurriedly retreated. Ling Han had captured even Wuxia, and Cheng Feiwen's battle prowess could only be considered on the same level as Wuxia's. It was definitely impossible that he would be a match for Ling Han. However, Ling Han's battle prowess could match a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. How could a mere ninth heaven celestial king be able to escape from him? He laid down his palm, and Cheng Feiwen was already captured in Ling Han's grasp. What do you want to do? Cheng Feiwen was both furious and stunned. Ling Han did not answer. He tied Cheng Feiwen with the chain as well, and dragged the two of them down the mountain. Ah! Cheng Feiwen released an outraged roar. This was an extraordinary humiliation. Ling Han only ignored him. He was going to find the third person. Everyone was watching. This guy had seriously trampled over the rules of the Martial Academy, so an elite would definitely step in to suppress him. At that time, how was this matter going to be resolved? Clang, clang, clang. The chains scraped the ground, causing an ear-piercing sound, and Wuxia and Cheng Feiwen were both yelling in pain. Their cultivation levels had been sealed off. Amidst the friction, their skin had split apart and blood flowed, leaving bloody traces behind them on the ground. If they were not both celestial kings, merely this kind of blood loss would be enough to kill them. Even so, they were both battered and mangled, making for a tragic sight. A great many people did not know the truth of the matter, and were whispering among themselves, talking about how cruel Ling Han was to actually treat disciples of the Martial Academy like this. Have you had enough? Just when Ling Han had reached the foot of the mountain, he heard a voice sound out in his ears. Ling Han raised his head, his eyes looking towards the mountain peak in the distance. He shook his head. Not enough. Only he could hear this voice. Thus, when they saw how Ling Han was talking to himself, everyone felt confused. Who was he talking to? And what did he mean? Not enough? What was not enough? Sigh. A low sigh rang out by everyone's ears, and a man in grey robes appeared. He said, "Because you have acted due to your family being injured, I allowed you to punish the culprits, but now you have gone too far." Lord Crimson Clouds. Everyone fell to their knees. This was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, and also the strongest elite presently in the Martial Academy. Wuxia and Cheng Feiwen came back to their senses, and both of them cried out loudly, "Please give us justice, Lord Crimson Clouds." To publicly humiliate the disciples of the Martial Academy within the grounds of the Martial Academy was a definite breach of rules, and how could the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate bluff through the matter as if nothing had happened in full public like this? That was impossible. These two people wanted to provoke the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate to step in and punish Ling Han. Ling Han was expressionless. Previously, when these people humiliated and wounded my son, have they not gone too far as well? 1 against 1 is a spar, so what is ganging up on him all at once? Since they are not abiding by the rules, what need is there for me to abide by the rules as well? Then, please do not blame me. The Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate sighed, and stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. If Ling Han was merely dealing with you Woody in private, the Heavenly Venerate would possibly turn a blind eye to it, but that was no longer possible now. If he still made no move, what would happen to the authority of the Martial Academy? Ling Han humphed, and delivered a punch in response. Pung! Their two blows crashed together, instantly causing a super great storm. Furthermore, those with sharp eyesight could still see that the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate had actually been sent flying. Heavens, a second-tier Heavenly Venerate had moved, and he was actually no match for Ling Han. After the storm dispersed, everyone could clearly see that Ling Han was still standing proudly in his original position, his back straight and upright, his expression determined, and his eyes cold, bearing a strong killing intent. Today, he was determined to make these people who had injured his son and grandson pay the price that their act deserved, no matter who came. Gasp! Meanwhile, the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate inhaled sharply. Who was he? He immediately discovered that last blow from Ling Han was a completely physical blow, and Ling Han had not drawn on the great power of heaven and earth, but even so, it had still overwhelmed him. Though the Crimson Clouds had not reached consummate level for second tier, he was still a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, and he was actually outmatched? What kind of freak was this? And Yu Wudi and Cheng Feiwen's expressions were filled with despair. Not even a second-tier Heavenly Venerate was a match for Ling Han. If that was really the case, then even if the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate returned, would he be capable of suppressing Ling Han? Heavenly Venerates possessed unimaginable privileges. As long as they did not side with hysteria, what was the simple matter of humiliating a ninth heaven celestial king worth? Would they ever manage to get revenge for today's humiliation? Chapter 2760, 2760 Not interfering. 2760 Not interfering. Everyone shook their head. Just because Yu Wudi had a second-tier Heavenly Venerate for a father backing him up, he had gathered accomplices to bully Ling Jinxue. How could he have imagined that the latter, too, had a second-tier Heavenly Venerate for a father? See, the latter's old man had come to get vengeance. Could this be blamed on Ling Han? Who would have no temper when his son was being bullied right under his nose? You are not at the second tier, the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate spoke up. His voice was filled with certainty. A second tier was definitely not like this, and he was very sure of that. If he wasn't a second tier, then which tier was he? Everyone was curious. Ling Han had just exchanged a single blow with the Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate, and had not fallen into any disadvantage at all in terms of strength. At the very least, he should be a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, right? Ling Han smiled. No. The Crimson Clouds Heavenly Venerate was filled with confusion. The other party had clearly not extracted the fundamental power of the Genesis world, and was capable of matching him purely with his own strength. In fact, he was even slightly superior, so the other's cultivation level definitely had to be third tier and above. But the problem here was, why hadn't he used his full power? To get revenge for your son, you are already creating such a big commotion in the Martial Academy. What other reservations would you have? Could it be? His eyes flickered, and a possibility rose up in his mind, causing his whole body to tremble. Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, he blurted out. When these words fell, a wave of commotion arose among the crowd. A pseudo-Heavenly Venerate? How could that be? What kind of massive joke was being played here? Was there any pseudo-Heavenly Venerate that was capable of matching a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? The problem here was that this massive joke had been blurted out by the mouth of the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate, a genuine second-tier Heavenly Venerate. How could he be mistaken? Was his insight inferior to theirs? Would he deliberately try to scare them with such alarming words? Ling Han had no intention of hiding the fact. He nodded. That's right. You are Ling Han, that Ling Han from an epoch ago, the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate continued. He could recall now. An epoch ago, he had still been a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, and he had heard that a fierce guy had arrived at the first spatial plane, and had easily charged his way into the general leaderboard. At the time, the Crimson Clouds had been thinking that when Ling Han advanced into Heavenly Venerable tier, and entered into the second spatial plane, he would take a good look at this newly rising star. But in the end, Ling Han had disappeared. However, Wu Haoyang, who had shared fame with Ling Han, emerged as a new force and soared in status. By now, he was already a fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate, equal to Xin Chihu and Lin Yolian. Together, they were called the Three Kings, and were characters that even the Crimson Clouds could only look up at with admiration. Originally, it had been thought that Ling Han could only serve as a background for Wu Haoyang, yet everyone had never imagined that he would have appeared once again after so many years had passed. A pseudo-Heavenly Venerate could match a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, then when he reached fourth tier, hiss. The Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate did not dare think further. Just how strong would this lord become in future? Ling Han, this is the Martial Academy, after all. How about you take a step back, he persuaded. Firstly, he had a favorable opinion of Ling Han's future prospects, and secondly, Ling Han had also used strength to show that he possessed the ability to match a second-tier Heavenly Venerate and become his equal. Naturally, the actual Heavenly Venerate was willing to stop putting on airs. Yu Wuti and Cheng Feiwen were both extremely depressed. They were the victims here, and the man was actually persuading the culprit kindly right in front of them? Ling Han shook his head. Impossible. Today, I will definitely make the criminals pay the price. You are the real criminal here. Yu Wuti and Cheng Feiwen were both shouting mentally, yet they could only emit moans with their mouths due to the pain. Ling Han continued to drag the two of them forwards, and the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate's expression was ugly. He should stop Ling Han, but he had just come for his shift to oversee the Martial Academy, and he was the only Heavenly Venerate in the whole Martial Academy. He knew himself was no match for Ling Han, so how could he manage to stop him? If he stepped forwards to pester Ling Han, that would only be asking for his own humiliation. There might be groundbreaking news of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate being outmatched by a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. In his eyes, his reputation was far more important than the lives of Yu Wuti and company. If they died, that would be it. In any case, the Crimson Clouds had already tried to stop Ling Han, it was just that he had not managed to succeed. Brother Ling, behave yourself, the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate said solemnly, then turned, and left. He would report this matter to the higher-ups. As for how Ling Han would be dealt with in the future, that would have to depend on the will of those powerful figures. He had left. Left. Everyone's mouth was wide open, unable to speak. Aren't you here to oversee the Martial Academy? Now, someone is committing a crime in public, and you are actually not interfering at all? It is not that Lord Crimson Clouds does not wish to interfere, but rather, this man is too strong, so even Lord Crimson Clouds cannot subdue him. Someone revealed the truth of the matter. Ling Han, Ling Han. Lord Crimson Clouds has said before that this is a character from an epoch ago. Ah, I remember now, there was indeed a fierce guy an epoch ago. Have you guys seen the names of Zhang San and Li Si on the Eternal Stone? That had been left behind by Ling Han. Also, it is said that when he was at the realm battlefield, he had only taken over 12,000 years to charge into the top 100 of the general leaderboard. He is definitely extremely freakish. You guys know Wu Haoyang, right? In the past, Ling Han had fully suppressed Wu Haoyang, and claimed the honor of being the strongest of that era. Gasp! Everyone inhaled sharply. It might be very abstract to speak of other matters, but Wu Haoyang's great reputation was too prominent. He had only used 1.2 billion years to become a 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate, but it was too difficult to complete the step from 4th tier to 5th tier, and that was why he had been staying at 4th tier all this while. He was the strongest prodigy in all of history, and together with Xian Qihu and Lin Youlian, the three were collectively known as the three great heavenly kings. In the future, it was possible that they could attain 7th tier, and were the hopes of the Genesis world. And in the past, Ling Han had been slightly superior to even Wu Haoyang, so it was naturally understandable how he could be so freakish. Ling Han was expressionless. He walked in the martial academy, and found the people that had bullied his son one after another. Some had not gotten the news yet, and he managed to capture them right in their abodes. Some of them had received the news and fled, but there was absolutely no way they could manage to flee from Ling Han. He captured them, and took them back to the martial academy. There were already as many as 12 people that were tied up in the chains, and these were all the culprits that had ganged up on Ling Jianxue previously. Aside from Yu Wudi, Ling Han hung the other 11 people up. Then, he stomped on Yu Wudi, his foot crushing the other's face. In the celestial realm, this man could still have been considered Ling Han's match, but now he was no longer qualified at all. Ling Han, just because your cultivation level is higher than mine, you are bullying me. What is so impressive about that? When my father returns, he will definitely behead you. Yu Wudi cried out loudly, his eyes spitting fire. Ling Han nodded. I have some debts to settle with Imperial Void as well. If he returns, I will kill him. Yu Wudi's demeanor involuntarily weakened. Even the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate was no match for Ling Han, and the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate had not advanced to the 2nd tier very long ago, so there was even less chance that the latter could be a match for Ling Han. Let me ask you, do you regret? Ling Han asked. Yu Wudi did not dare to speak tough anymore. He definitely had to yield for the moment, so he nodded. Yes. Do you know the error of your ways? Ling Han asked again. I was wrong. Yu Wudi was very well behaved. Good. Ling Han nodded. He tapped out a finger. Pa! One of Yu Wudi's arms instantly exploded, turning into a rain of blood. Ah! Yu Wudi screamed out in pain, and almost passed out. Originally, he had thought that submitting would make Ling Han spare him, but clearly, he had thought wrong. Yet Ling Han did not have the slightest sympathy. He tapped out another finger. Pa! Yu Wudi's other arm exploded as well. Ling Han did not stop at all. After another tap of his finger, Yu Wudi's legs exploded, one after the other. There were people watching them, and none of them dared to make a noise. This guy was too ruthless, wasn't he? Just because Yu Wudi had beaten Ling Han's son, Ling Han actually dared to execute punishment in full public in the martial academy like this. Was he planning to execute 1,000 wounds on Yu Wudi while he was alive? In the future, they definitely could not become enemies with Ling Jianxue. No, they had best hide as far away as possible when they encountered anyone by the surname of Ling. Chapter 2761, 2761 settled. 2761 settled. Ling Han aimed precisely for this. Who would dare to bully the descendants of the Lin clan in the martial academy? Or the descendants of the Wu clan? None, because both Lin Luo and Wu Jihong have established a reputation of being invincible. Everyone knew that the two of them had already leaped out of the limits of rules. If they wanted to kill, they could, and no one could stop them. Thus, there would be no one that would dare trifle with their family and friends either, because they would only push themselves onto the path of no return. Ling Han also wished to establish such a ferocious reputation, guaranteeing the absolute safety of his family and friends. Otherwise, how was he supposed to clash with his full power against hysteria in the realm battlefield? Brother Ling. The Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate appeared once more. His expression was very complicated. Please carefully consider before you do anything. I have already considered very carefully. Ling Han threw a punch. Pa! Yu Wudi's head was instantly shattered to bits. Clang! The heaven and earth cried in grief, unleashing a haze of blood rain. Ling Han's eyes sharpened, and he exclaimed to the heavens, "This kind of evil villain died, and is actually worthy of the grief of the heaven and earth? Go back." He unleashed his might. Boom! The haze of blood rain instantly reversed its flow, and as Ling Han's might surged, it resounded in all of their hearts, forcefully suppressing the grief and sorrow that the heaven and earth had stimulated. This was practically heaven-defying. Everyone hissed sharply. Though cultivating itself was an act that defied the heavens otherwise, one would not be blasted by a heavenly tribulation every time they had a breakthrough in truth. Cultivators were also attached to the heavenly tribulation, just like how celestial kings represented regulations. Even a heavenly venerate would need to draw on the fundamental power of the Genesis world to be able to unleash their full might. The difference was that a heavenly venerate had transcended, so even if they were in other dimensions, they would still possess great power. Similarly, they would have to extract the fundamental power of the Genesis world, which was not limited to a specific dimension. Hence, even a heavenly venerate actually would not purposely oppose the heaven and earth. Yet Ling Han had forcefully reversed the grief of the heaven and earth, and there was no actual significance to it either. What was the point? According to a mighty figure, disobeying the heaven and earth would have extremely severe consequences, and even a heavenly venerate would have to be cautious. Quang! The furious sound of thunder rang out in the heaven and earth, and bolts of lightning struck down rapidly, targeting Ling Han. Initially, a transcendent dimension would have extremely great tolerance. Perhaps only when a 7th-tier heavenly venerate unleashed his full power would he then be targeted. However, who asked Ling Han to purposely go against the heavens? This naturally enraged the heaven and earth. Ling Han was unafraid, and merely looked coldly at the skies. His strength was not dependent on the heaven and earth, and it was completely based on himself alone. My Tao uses myself as the core. Even if I am not in the form of a dimension, I myself am a dimension. Ling Han inwardly declared. Even if he were to be despised by the heaven and earth, and he would be completely blocked off from extracting the power of heaven and earth, he was not concerned at all. This heavenly tribulation lasted for the whole period of half a month before dispersing, showing that the hatred that the heaven and earth had for Ling Han had reached an extremely high level. When the Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate reported Ling Han's actions to the higher-ups at the Rising Cloud's Heavenly Academy, it immediately caused a great commotion. Some mighty figures supported the course of punishing Ling Han severely. This was a public breach of the rules of the Martial Academy, and it by itself was a great wrong. Furthermore, Yu Wudi was the son of a Heavenly Venerate. If such a matter was condoned, how were the Heavenly Venerates here supposed to focus on fighting? Oh, if even the safety of their family could not be guaranteed, then whose families were they fighting to protect? But there were also powerful figures that supported Ling Han. It was indeed Yu Wudi who had broken the rules first. Not only had he used his overwhelming power to bully, he had told others to gang up on Ling Jianxue. It was no wonder that Ling Han would be furious. Of course, killing Wu Yudi had gone a little too far. How was he to be dealt with? Both arguments had their supporters, and no result was produced even after long periods of debate. They could only continue to forward the report further up the hierarchy, for it to be decided by those 7th-tier Heavenly Venerates. After all, Ling Han was really too freakish. As a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, he was capable of matching a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate. This kind of talent was what the Genesis world needed the most. Very soon, the powerful figure spoke. This action of Ling Han had gone too far, but because the Genesis world needed a prodigy like him, he would be allowed to redeem himself with battle merits. After he broke through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, he would be sent to fight in the realm battlefield. This was equivalent to no punishment at all. When the news came out, this naturally almost killed the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate with fury. Yu Wudi was his only son, and he treasured him as much as his own life. For the sake of the latter's future prospects, he had even deliberately sealed him, which showed what great expectations he had had for Yu Wudi. But now, his son was gone. He wanted to immediately charge back to fight to death with Ling Han, but he very soon suppressed this impulse. Not even the Crimson Clouds was a match for Ling Han, and the Imperial Void would be even less of a match. He begged for an audience with the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. His master was extremely freakish, and was already a 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate by now. If the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable was willing to interfere, then suppressing Ling Han would naturally be a piece of cake. Master, please help me. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate knelt in front of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Ever since advancing to the Celestial King tier, he had practically never knelt in front of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable again, but now, for the sake of his son, he had fallen to his knees once more. The sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable sat calmly. After advancing to the 3rd tier, his aura had become increasingly subtle. Being able to cultivate to the level of Heavenly Venerable tier in such a barren place like the Celestial Realm represented astonishing natural talent by itself. Hence, after the sealed emotion arrived at the Flaming Frost Realm, he enjoyed a great burst in cultivation level, but 3rd tier was practically as far as he could go. Without any special circumstances, there would never be any hopes of him reaching 4th tier. His eyes closed, he said lowly, I have never expected that a mere pawn would actually develop to the level he has reached today. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was filled with even more resentment. Previously, he had wanted to kill Ling Han repeatedly, yet the latter had always managed to escape. If his resolution had been just the slightest bit firmer in the past, he might have already killed Ling Han by now. How could so many things have happened then? This line of Yuan Sheng wishes to make a comeback. The sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable's eyes snapped open, blazing light shooting right into the heavens. It would not be convenient to make a move in the Martial Academy, but ultimately, he would have to come here. Once he is on his way, I will personally move to snipe him. He withdrew his gaze, and returned once more to that icy, dead man's face. Thank you, Master. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was overjoyed. With the interference of a 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate, there was no doubt that Ling Han would die. No one had expected that Ling Han would actually be able to resolve such a great crisis so easily, but upon deeper thought, if anyone could match a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate while he himself was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, wouldn't he also get special treatment? Moreover, it was Yu Wudi himself who had been courting death, and had been the first to break the rules. And those at the realm battlefield had also heard of Ling Han's story. A great many people felt rueful. That Ling Han from the past had returned once more. As expected of Demon King Ling, he had caused such a great commotion immediately upon his reappearance. But Ling Han kept a very low profile. He just accompanied his son and grandson, and only once he had seen that Ling Jianxue's and his son's injuries were all healed did he set out with the Empress to search for the core of the Flaming Frost Realm. This took them quite a few years, but there were a great many pseudo-Heavenly Venerates that had taken this step here. Hence, the the location of the core was no secret. Primarily, it was due to the time needed for the journey. The core of a transcendent dimension was very hard to approach. The journey towards the core was fraught with considerable dangers. This had surpassed regulations. A ninth heaven celestial king would be killed by the slightest moment of carelessness. Yet Ling Han and the Empress were both already pseudo-heavenly venerates, and their battle prowess had reached the level of second and first-tier heavenly venerate, respectively, so there naturally would not be much difficulty. After 70-odd years, they finally arrived at the location of the core of the realm. They could not approach it. An 18-colored light sphere was glowing radiantly, its beauty indescribable, but that kind of frightening wave of power caused even Ling Han to feel his heart jolt. He did not dare draw near to it at all. Be careful. You have defied the heavens previously, so it is extremely possible that you would be deliberately targeted by the heaven and earth, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded. He naturally had no fear of a heavenly tribulation, but the heaven and earth could hide away that unique power and prevent him from comprehending it. It was also possible that they would stimulate this power to attack him. Who asked him to take the initiative to come here? Chapter 2762 Breaking Through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier. 2762 Breaking Through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier. Ling Han and the Empress sat at a distance apart. The gap in strength between the two was huge, so it was naturally impossible to sit together. The closer they were to the core, the easier it was to sense the unique power in it. The two began to cultivate in seclusion. To take a step further towards the highest level was difficult. Both of them were already close to, or in fact had even reached, their limits, and it was already impossible to accommodate more power of the dimension. Even if they could, it would take a ridiculously large amount of time. They activated their physique to speed up the flow of time. After 70 million years, Ling Han finally comprehended the unique power of the flaming frost realm, and began to extract it into his body. Another 50 million years later, he had successfully completed the process. The Empress' natural talent wasn't as good as his, but the amount of power she could absorb was far less compared to him. Therefore, she had also successfully integrated this final bit of power. The two of them could now break through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier. Let's go back to the Martial Academy. They could break through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier here, but Ling Han's actions had been heaven-defying. He'd better not suffer a backlash from the heaven and earth at the most critical moment now. That would be a huge laughing matter. So, it would be best to get out of here first. They returned to the Martial Academy. After such a long time, Ling Fifan had already reached the 9th heaven, while Ling Jianxue had already broken through to the pseudo-heavenly Venerable Tier. Both father and son had gone to the realm battlefield to fight against Hysteria's army. Of course, Chen Shuangshuang and Enshior had gone with them. Ling Han couldn't help shaking his head. The time he spent cultivating at the level of pseudo-heavenly Venerable Tier was a long time indeed, and now even his son had caught up with him in terms of cultivation level. Perhaps he might even have broken through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier. Ling Han and the Empress began to break through to the Heavenly Venerable Tier. This wasn't a secret within the Martial Academy. Everyone was curious about how powerful Ling Han would be after successfully taking this step. A second-tier Heavenly Venerate would definitely not be his match. What about a third-tier Heavenly Venerate? Some people looked forward to it, and some were jealous, while some people secretly hated it. For example, Huai had only reached the 4th heaven after the passing of so many years, but considering his aptitude, this was already a miracle. There was no way about it. Who asked his father to have already become a second-tier Heavenly Venerate so much earlier, and be able to give him greater quantity and more precious cultivation resources? No one had any doubts that Ling Han could possibly fail. He had already obtained the battle prowess of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, so how could it be that he might get stuck at the Heavenly Venerable Tier? What they were not sure about was when Ling Han would end his seclusion. Ling Han was meditating. As a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he was different from the others. Others used the power of a dimension to temper their bodies. When they reached a certain height in cultivation level and their physique was strong enough, they would be able to directly extract this power for their own use, exponentially increasing their battle prowess. When the conditions were right, success would naturally follow, so as long as one could reach the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, then one could definitely become a real heavenly venerate. It was completely different for Ling Han. He had formed a core of power in his body, and all the power would burst forth from that core, so he didn't need to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, he could only borrow the unique power of whichever dimension that he was in. No matter what, there would only be one kind of power. So, what would be the point of his efforts for the last epoch? He wanted to let the power of the core in his body flow through his body and refine it until it reached the pinnacle so as to be able to fully withstand the eruption of power from the core. Then, he would be able to boldly confront his enemies. With just a thought, full strength would burst forth from within the core instead of just him relying on the power of his physique. Ling Han slowly unleashed his inner core, allowing the power to circulate in his body over and over again. He had gone through this process many times. He was proficient at it, and was doing it in a relaxed manner. He then slowly released the inner core, and soon afterwards, more and more power burst forth. Boom! The bursting forth of power surged through his body, roaring endlessly. Such commotion could be heard throughout the entire martial academy, and everyone was shocked. No one had ever seen any pseudo-heavenly venerate who would cause such a huge commotion when breaking through into the next level. As time passed, the power circulating within Ling Han's body became stronger and more terrifying. The fluctuations in aura which resulted from it even caused the space to tremble, and everyone felt endangered. If such an aura was to get out of control, the entire martial academy might be destroyed in one fell swoop. After 70,000 years, the Empress was the first to break through, and successfully obtained the position of Heavenly Venerate. Although heavenly tribulation descended upon her, it did not affect her at all. However, Ling Han continued to temper his body. He was integrating too many kinds of power from the dimensions, and he still hadn't reached his limit. He was not anxious, as this was what he had expected. 100,000 years, 200,000 years, and then nearly 300,000 years later, Ling Han finally realized that he was about to reach his limit. However, at this moment, a violent power suddenly exploded within his body. Pooh! Ling Han immediately vomited blood. This was obviously the power of the dimension he had recently extracted, the unique power of the Flaming Frost Realm. This power had previously been very stable, but at such a critical time, it suddenly turned against him. Ling Han was already about to reach his limit, and with the sudden rebellion of this power, the impact on him could well be imagined. It was a disaster. He quickly suppressed it, but the revolt of this power caused chaos among the powers of other dimensions. Due to a chain reaction which ensued, his core spewed out power uncontrollably, attacking his body. Pa, 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 his bones were all shattered in an instant. It didn't matter that they were as strong as divine metal, the unique power of the dimension was naturally at the heavenly venerable tier, and it was unknown how many of such powers were rebelling, so even divine metal was instantly shattered. Ling Han couldn't suppress these violent powers. Boom, 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 his core was spewing out more and more power terrifyingly at an astonishing speed, directly tearing his body apart. When it reached a limit, boom, the core exploded. Ling Han was instantly shattered into countless fragments, both his body and soul severely injured. With his weak soul, he forcibly gathered each fragment and reassembled them. He sat down cross-legged, channeling the indestructible heaven scroll over and over again, and trying to heal himself. But it was too difficult. His body had turned into countless fragments, and each fragment had a unique power of a certain dimension. These powers were originally fused together by Ling Han, but now they were completely separated. Furthermore, they had become incompatible with one another, and there was no way for them to be fused together. He had failed. Ling Han could not reconcile himself to this fact, and even more couldn't accept it. He had worked hard for so long, and raised his battle prowess to an unprecedented level, but now he couldn't break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier? Husband. Lu Yutong and others rushed over. Due to the previous big explosion, the secret chamber where Ling Han was cultivating in seclusion was completely destroyed, which naturally alarmed all the women, and they all looked at Ling Han with horror. Despite the fact that Ling Han had put his body together, there were bloodstains everywhere, especially on his chest. Astonishingly, there was a hole where blood was gushing out. At a glance, one could tell something was wrong. Ling Han gave a wry smile. I have failed in breaking through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. It seems that something went wrong. Take it slow, you will definitely be able to recover, the Empress consoled him. After she had achieved Heavenly Venerable tier, she had become more graceful and elegant. Ling Han nodded, and continued channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Seeing that Ling Han was still able to practice his cultivation technique, all the women felt slightly relieved. However, each of their faces had a worried expression. How serious was Ling Han's condition? At this moment, they would just have to wait patiently. Chapter 2763, 2763 Crippled. 2763 Crippled. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll over and over again, but he could only repair his body superficially. Externally, the bloodstains on his body had disappeared, but the bloody hole in his chest was still there, his heart had disappeared, and blood was continuously gushing out. He couldn't control his body at all. Every muscle and every bone had each become an independent part, and internally, there existed the unique powers of the dimension. There was no way they could be unified at all. In this way, he wasn't even good enough as a celestial king, let alone to battle against a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han tried to exert force, and suddenly let out a muffled groan. The powers in his body clashed with each other, and he couldn't deliver a strike at all. It would only cause conflict within his body. The blow instantly shattered his right hand. He put the pieces of his right hand back together again, frowning. Now this was a huge problem. He didn't think it was because he had previously rebelled against the heaven and earth, and therefore was deliberately being targeted by the flaming frost realm. This was entirely due to him being too greedy, having absorbed too much power from the dimension, and far exceeding the limit that his body could sustain. Therefore, once all of it was channeled, he exploded. Now that his core had been shattered, his previous efforts had all gone to waste, and he had completely become a cripple. Was there no way to remedy it? Ling Han kept trying and trying to rebuild his core, and fused all these powers into it once again, but he found that this was simply a delusion. The powers within his body were too chaotic. They would counteract one another at the slightest movement, and cause him to be split apart into pieces in an instant. He tried various methods, but to no avail. The Empress even went to ask Wally to come over, but there was nothing Wally could do about it. He was good at analyzing data, but he had never encountered such a situation before, and could only stare blankly. The previous massive explosion of Ling Han had stirred up such a great commotion that there was no way to hide it, as the powerful aura that filled the entire martial academy had disappeared, so Ling Han had to have stopped breaking through. Why hadn't Ling Han made an appearance yet? Someone had discovered that Wally had gone to Ling Han's abode, and went to ask him specifically. This guy didn't know how to keep secrets at all, so he told the truth after being offered a piece of divine metal. Immediately, the entire martial academy was in an uproar. Ling Han was crippled. He had failed in breaking through to become a Heavenly Venerate. It was said that he had suffered a very severe Dao injury, with no chance of recovery. This piece of news seemed to have grown wings, and it quickly spread to the realm battlefield, triggering a huge commotion. Ling Han's friends, such as Rain Emperor, Yi, and the others, all felt sorry, but being in the realm battlefield meant that they couldn't leave as they pleased. They also couldn't just drop everything to visit Ling Han. However, he had many enemies. Not just enemies, for example, his rivals such as He Yufeng, Lu Tianxian, and others were all excited. Previously, they had all been so happy, but it had all been in vain as it turned out that Ling Han hadn't been dead, and had made a comeback. However, this time, this piece of news was legitimate, and they all laughed heartily. Finally, this guy was doomed. Ling Han's potential was astonishing, therefore, whether he was really crippled or not had great implications. Not long after, a distinguished and powerful figure arrived. Chu Hao, 6th tier Heavenly Venerate. This person was an extremely powerful figure because he was the disciple of Lin Luo, the 7th tier Heavenly Venerate, and he himself was expected to break through to become a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate. He was the person in the entire Genesis world who bore the greatest expectations, or one of them. Aside from him, there were Zhou Heng, Lin Xiaoyang, and the other 6th tier Heavenly Venerates, as well as rising stars such as Lin Youlian, Xin Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and others, who might become 7th tier Heavenly Venerates in the future. Chu Hao personally examined Ling Han's situation. "Lord Chu, how is it?" All the women were filled with concern. Chu Hao frowned, and after quite a while, he said, "You wanted to condense the unique powers of the major dimensions and turn them into your own core. This is a very creative and bold idea, but you have absorbed too many powers. Now these powers are in conflict with each other in your body, and if I forcibly suppress them, I can only annihilate them one by one, which means that all your previous efforts will be in vain." All the women were disappointed. Even Chu Hao couldn't do anything about it. Then what about Lin Luo? Ling Han murmured to himself hesitantly, "That is to say, if I want to change the current situation, I have to give up everything and start all over again? To revert this, he would have to go back in time by one epoch, back to the time when he was still a 9th heaven celestial king." "Correct." Chu Hao nodded. Ling Han thought for a long time before saying, "Let me think through it carefully, I don't want to waste my previous efforts before trying out all means." "Yes." Chu Hao nodded, having great admiration for Ling Han's decision because he also had a similar character. No matter what situation he was faced with, he would never give up hope, even if such hope did not exist in the eyes of others, with the success rate being absolutely zero. "Call me if you need anything." He left a letter with his divine seal, which contained a fragment of his divine sense. After tearing it apart, the divine sense would materialize. It had the battle prowess of a 5th tier Heavenly Venerate, and he would be able to sense it as well. Ling Han nodded, and said solemnly, "I will always remember your kindness, sir." Chu Hao smiled. This person was a bit like how he had been in the past. This filled him with a favorable impression of Ling Han. As long as one is alive, one should never give up hope. He patted Ling Han's shoulder lightly before taking his leave. However, when he left like this, and Ling Han's condition didn't get better, this naturally convinced everyone that Ling Han was really doomed, and even the 6th tier Heavenly Venerate couldn't do anything about it. Some people felt that it was such a pity. It was such a pity that this person, being an incomparably freakish prodigy, could not become a Heavenly Venerate to fight against hysteria. However, there were some people who scoffed, saying what was the point? No matter how strong a person was, could he defeat hysteria? On the contrary, Ling Han let go of the burdens on his heart. He often walked around the martial academy so as to refresh his frame of mind. His condition was seen by everyone. There was a bloody hole in his heart, which could not be recovered. This also made people feel rueful. Ling Han was truly doomed. From then on, Ling Han's name was no longer found on the list of prodigies. However, Ling Han did not give up at all. He actually had a way out. If worse came to worst, he could act according to conventions and cultivate like the others. With his freakishness, he could still become the strongest Heavenly Venerate, but he would only be one of them. But he didn't want to take this step until it was absolutely necessary. One reason was that he was unwilling, and the other reason was that he believed that there was always a way out. There had to be a solution. Time passed slowly, and the news of Ling Han becoming a cripple had also become old news, which was only brought up occasionally. Some people would sigh, while others would treat the subject with scorn and ridicule. Huai, for example, was the more active type. Yu Wuti had already died, and Huai was the only person in the martial academy who had an old grudge with Ling Han. He had been reluctant to offend Ling Han before, but he no longer had any scruples this time. He kept condemning Ling Han, be it in public or in private, trying his best to humiliate Ling Han, and criticizing him to the point of being worthless. Huai absolutely wasn't afraid of Ling Han coming to make trouble for him. With Ling Han being a cripple, what was there for Huai to be afraid of? However, after the Empress heard about it, she directly went to kill him without the slightest hesitation. To say nothing of the fact that Huai wasn't even a disciple of the martial academy, so what even if he was? Given the Empress's especially proud character, if someone was to offend Ling Han, she would definitely give that person a death penalty. As Huai wasn't a disciple of the martial academy, the Empress would not violate any rules even if she killed him. However, when the news came out, would Zhuobing let it go? He would definitely come to seek revenge against the Empress. The Empress wasn't fearful in the least. To say nothing of the fact that they still possessed trump cards, her own battle prowess could match a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, so she didn't take it seriously at all. The only thing she cared about was Ling Han. Chapter 2764, 2764 Turn of Events. 2764 Turn of Events. Ling Han tried all means, yet these paths proved not to be feasible. Could it be that he really could only give up? Ling Han calmed his heart, giving up all thoughts of benefits and rewards of his actions, and lived the most peaceful, ordinary life. With the company of the Empress and the others, he traveled mountains and seas, his temperament becoming more and more at peace. On a particular night, he sat on the banks of a pond, looking at the many stars reflected in the waters. When Li Sikan mischievously tossed a stone in, it instantly caused many ripples to form. Ling Han suddenly stiffened. It seemed like he was close to grasping something, but when he stretched out his hand, he did not touch anything. In this instant, he felt an intolerable itch in his heart. A small crack had opened in the great doors ahead of him, yet he had simply forgotten the scenery that lay within. Ling Han lowered his head, and saw that the stars in the pond had already become countless broken reflections. Ling Han felt an enlightenment come to him, but felt like he was just a bit away from it. Because of his insistence, everyone settled down here. Ling Han sat by the pond every day, and when 70-odd days had passed, he suddenly attained enlightenment, and broke into a loud laughter. Since his inner core had shattered, just let it be then. Why had he wanted to condense an inner core? That was because he had wanted to be able to depend on his inner core to continuously provide power even after leaving a specific dimension so that he, a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, would attain a height that had never been reached before. However, he had been under a misconception. A realm would indeed possess a core, but what about 10 dimensions, or 100 dimensions? They each had their own respective cores, but they were not fused together. Each was a unique power in the first place, so how could they possibly meld together? Previously, Ling Han had indeed fused them together, but from the looks of things now, he had only needed them together. He had not truly fused them into one at all. Hence, when the most crucial moment had arrived, the power of the flaming frost realm had exploded, stimulating the whole core to go berserk and his whole body to explode. This was a path that he could not continue to follow. No matter how freakish he was, it was useless because this was a wrong path in the first place. Then was there no way to achieve this? No. Ling Han shook his head. Actually, the solution had long since been given to him, he just had not realized it at the time. He could look at a slightly bigger structure, and think of himself as a Genesis world. Then, every single cell inside his body was a dimension of its own, and each cell could bear the power of dimension. Then what would happen? Ling Han immediately began his attempt. He no longer tried to fuse the powers inside his body, but rather let things progress naturally. He thought of himself as a greater world, and all the powers inside his body could evolve and develop as they wished, as long as they could be his to use. Of course, this was easier said than done, but to have so many chaotic powers burst forth at the same time and be available for him to use, but simultaneously not have them conflict with one another definitely was not a matter that could be achieved simply by thinking. Ling Han sat still, and time passed continuously. 100 years, 1000, 10, 000. In the blink of an eye, another 70 million years had passed. Ling Han released a battle cry, and suddenly stood. Boom! A world-shaking power burst out of his body, causing even the heavens to tremble. He had recovered his full battle prowess, and even gone far beyond it. After all, he had gained an additional unique power of the Flaming Frost realm. Husband. All the women were extremely pleased and surprised. Ling Han broke into a smile. I have worried all of you these years. The women all shook their heads, but they were weeping. They had been worried about Ling Han all this while. How proud their man was, yet he had become a publicly acknowledged cripple. This had to have caused him incredible, great suffering. And now, he had finally stood back up again. The Empress smiled faintly. I have always believed you. Husband, let us return immediately to the Martial Academy, and show those people so we can slap reality in their faces. Zhu Xian'er exclaimed. The women all nodded. They all had anger bottled up inside of them. No hurry, Ling Han said smilingly. Let us visit other dimensions first. Ah! The women all gaped. You have just recovered, and now you're heading off again? Ling Han nodded. Trust me. Now, he had truly comprehended and thought of himself as a Genesis world, capable of accommodating the power of various dimensions. Then, he actually had no limits so to speak, and the power inside his body could be endless. In other words, even after he reached the 7th tier, the power of this first tier could still strengthen exponentially, far surpassing the limits of the 7th tier. But before this, he would first have to comprehend the true essence of the power of dimension created by the Genesis world. By then, he would be able to leap out of the confines of the Genesis world, and a new power of dimension could also arise from within his body itself. Hysteria had only manifested as a dimension, yet Ling Han was the entire Genesis world. Which of them had the superior structure here? Of course, the superiority of the structure would still have to depend on the cultivation level. If there was too much difference in cultivation level, then everything would still be meaningless. Hence, Ling Han wanted to comprehend even more powers of dimensions, right until he himself could create a power of dimension. Then, even after he advanced to the 1st tier, 2nd tier, or 3rd tier, his body would still be able to continuously create new powers of dimension, causing his strength to become limitless. Hysteria can easily give rise to heavenly venerates, so when I attain great accomplishment, not only would I be able to do the same, but in fact, I could even give rise to a 7th tier heavenly venerate with a mere thought, right? Ling Han mused. If this was told to others, everyone would definitely think that Ling Han had lost his mind. Even celestial kings could only depend on themselves to cultivate every step of the way, and he wanted to just simply produce a heavenly venerate? A 7th tier heavenly venerate at that? Yet Ling Han was filled with confidence. When that time came, he really would be able to. Because he himself was the Genesis world, and a Genesis world that could make all the decisions for himself at that, so what would he not be able to do? Come, I will bring you to the martial crystalline realm first. Ling Han waved a hand, and the women were all wrapped by his power. Then, their figures gradually disappeared. If there was a Heavenly Venerate here, he would definitely experience a great shock because this was no ordinary spatial movement. Whichever corner of the flaming frost realm he was looking in, no further traces of Ling Han and the company could possibly be discovered. They directly traversed the Genesis world, heading towards the martial crystalline realm. This was incredibly inconceivable. For example, when Zhou Heng had headed into the celestial realm, that had been because he had the lighthouse of the realm to guide him, and if he had ripped a hole in the barrier between realms out of nowhere, there would have been no cure for him wherever he went. Ling Han was different as his body contained the unique power of the martial crystalline realm. As long as he could use it to sense, the martial crystalline realm would become a lighthouse that was shining in the dark, allowing him to travel there easily. 19 years later, they arrived at the martial crystalline realm, so fast that it was unbelievable. Ling Han headed into the Promise City realm, where he continued to extract the unique power of this realm. Now that he had had a dawning enlightenment, he was naturally relaxed. Within 3 years, he had already mastered this power, and it solidified in every single cell of his body. Next, he and the women all headed to the next dimension, and similarly, in just 3 to 4 years, he had gained another power of the dimension. The Genesis world now had only a single transcendent dimension, 99 high-level dimensions, and 9,999 medium-level dimensions. In the case of low-level dimensions, their number reached as many as tens of thousands. Ling Han just proceeded slowly like that. After around 3 million years, he suddenly realized that he had actually come to the foreign realm. In other words, he only had to take another step, and he would be able to return to the celestial realm. When they found out about this, the women couldn't help but feel excited. Though their home would be wherever Ling Han was, they still had friends and family in the celestial realm. Over an epoch had passed. How were they all doing now? Chapter 2765, 2765 Huai Jian has become a Heavenly Venerate. 2765 Huai Jian has become a Heavenly Venerate. The foreign realm, a very familiar place. In the past, compelled by the Heavenly Venerates of the two realms, Ling Han had had no choice but to take risks by fleeing here. He had also experienced a hot-blooded youth here that was filled with battle. After more than an epoch, he had returned once more. But this time, he was already a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, and his true strength had probably reached the 3rd tier. He could sweep aside all and any opposition here. Let's go to the core of the dimension first. Compared with seeking out those elites of the foreign realm and taking revenge, Ling Han's priority now was naturally to take hold of the core of the dimension first. When he claimed all the powers of dimension, who knew, Ling Han might be able to comprehend the profound secrets of how the Genesis world gave rise to dimensions, and from there become capable of producing power of dimension within his own body. Because this was the foreign realm, they also took note of a matter that was widely spread as they traveled. Huai Jian was presently breaking through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Huai Jian? Ling Han was dazed for a moment before realization dawned on him. Huai Jian was the most outstanding prodigy of the foreign realm from an epoch ago. At the time, Ling Han could fight him to a stalemate. He had not thought that Huai Jian was about to become a Heavenly Venerate after an epoch. Ling Han felt very rueful. The people that he knew all had extremely great improvement. Of course, to say nothing of the fact that Huai Jian had not become a Heavenly Venerate, even if he had reached the limits of this dimension, Ling Han would have been able to suppress him single-handedly. While a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, he was unbelievably powerful. Not too many years later, they arrived at the location of the core here. Originally, the core of a dimension could not be approached. This was the true power of heaven and earth. Once one approached it, they would be strongly rebounded by the power of this dimension. This might far surpass regulations. However, Ling Han presently already possessed third-tier strength, and this was the core of a low-level dimension, so compared with Ling Han, it was actually outmatched. If Ling Han unleashed his full power, he could even burst this core of the dimension. He naturally would not do that. Instead, he stretched out a hand, and stuck his hand directly into the core of the dimension, forcefully extracting the power of this dimension. In other places, he would only be seated nearby, comprehending the power of the dimension, but now that the balance of strength was inclined towards him instead, there was no need to go to so much trouble. He could just simply extract it. It was simple and domineering. The core of the dimension trembled, seemingly afraid that Ling Han would burst it, yet it did not dare to fight back at all. Ling Han soon completed the process, and one of the cells inside his body condensed the power of this dimension. In the future, this process would repeat endlessly. This was really overwhelmingly fast. They left the core, and saw the entire foreign realm was in a state of excitement. The reason for this was very simple. Huai Jian had successfully broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, and the foreign realm had gained another supreme elite. Shall we go and take a look? The women were all very curious. This was a prodigy that had been able to become their husband's equal, and now he had also broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Sure. Ling Han nodded. He, too, wanted to know if the foreign realm had broken the agreement, and begun an invasion against the celestial realm again. Because the news of Huai Jian breaking through to the Heavenly Venerable tier caused a great commotion, it was very easy to investigate his whereabouts. Who would imagine that anyone would dare to make a move on Huai Jian? You all? The person that they asked looked at Ling Han and his group, and then shook his head. Young man, you guys wanting to admire an elite is understandable, but what cultivation level are you in? Are you guys even qualified to go? At present, Ling Han and company had disguised themselves as beings of the foreign realm, and with their strength, there was completely no worry that anyone would see through their disguises. Ling Han naturally would not drop to his level, and merely responded with a smile. When they had gotten their answers, Ling Han and company set out, heading towards the Mountain of 10,000 Swords. The Mountain of 10,000 Swords was where Huai Jian had gone into seclusion to break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. In the past, it was not called the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, but when Huai Jian was comprehending Tao, thousands and thousands of sword projections appeared on the mountain. When those who cultivated sword Tao saw this, they experienced boundless enlightenment. Hence, this mountain had also been renamed as Mountain of 10,000 Swords. From then onwards, it had also become a sacred land of the foreign realm. At the foot of the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, there was a sea of people. Everyone was fighting to catch a glimpse of the newly promoted Heavenly Venerate. The latter was a living legend, and also the only person who had become a Heavenly Venerate in the latest epoch. Sigh, if there had not been a demon king that had barged in here in the past, perhaps it would not just have been Lord Huai Jian alone who would have broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, someone suddenly said ruefully. Lord Lu, what does that mean? Someone beside him asked. The man from before shook his head. In the past, there had been quite a number of prodigies that were Lord Huai Jian's equal. Even if they were inferior, they were not too far off from him either. But a spy from the celestial realm hid himself under the wings of Lord Desolate Eternity. When he was exposed, he actually killed those prodigies, and only Lord Huai Jian was spared. What? The people in the area all exclaimed. This was secret knowledge that they were unaware of. Ling Han just happened to be nearby, and couldn't help but feel startled for a moment. Wasn't he the one that was being talked about now? He had not thought that there would actually be people that would still remember him even after so many years. The speaker merely smiled, and did not proceed to make explanations for what had happened in the past. However, those people in the vicinity all began to curse Ling Han. Some said that he was underhanded, and there were some that said he was treacherous. The foreign realm had treated him so well, yet he had still not come to his senses. Ling Han was unconcerned, but the women all looked furious. Shui Yanyu was the first to move. Pang! A gust of power rippled out. Pa, pa, pa. Some of the people around instantly collapsed. Though she was only a first heaven celestial king, and not a strong one at that, the people around her were only at the ascending origin tier at best, so how could they possibly withstand her power? This commotion was too great, and it immediately led to observation on an even greater scale. People were all confused. Why had a fight suddenly broken out here? But everyone knew that with how strong Shui Yanyu was, she had to be a 10th Lotus elite at the very least, so how many people would dare to interfere in her matters? Humph, this is the sacred land where Lord Huai Jian has attained Tao. Today, there are even a considerable number of Lord Heavenly Venerates that have come to offer congratulations. Who dares to be insolent here? Someone reprimanded. He was a red-haired man, and his right arm was the complete form of a scorpion's pincer. He had the confidence to reprimand her because he was a 13th Lotus elite. It's me, so what about it? Shui Yanyu countered. The red-haired man glanced a while longer at Shui Yanyu, humphed, and then said, "Kneel down immediately, and beg for forgiveness in the direction of the summit. I can spare you this once." He could tell with a glance that Shui Yanyu's cultivation level was only at the 10th Lotus, and the gap between the two of them was boundless. Shui Yanyu naturally would not agree. She scoffed, "If you kneel down and apologize to me, I will spare you just this once." "How dare you?" When the red-haired man saw that Shui Yanyu actually dared to mimic him, he immediately shouted loudly. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed out at Shui Yanyu. The scorpion pincers grew exponentially in size, with iridescent light wrapped around it, exuding the great might of regulations of the great Tao. A puny 10th Lotus actually dared to talk back to him. She truly had to be tired of living. Bewitching Maiden Ro gave a soft shout, and sent out a palm strike. Pang! The red-haired man was immediately sent flying, a mist of green-colored blood gushing out of him. She was a 9th heaven celestial king. Though it was impossible for her to further advance to the Heavenly Venerable tier, her battle prowess naturally was not something that the red-haired man could match. Pang, 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 pang. The red-haired man was struck flying, and his body crashed into all the obstacles blocking his way, destroying a considerable number of mountain rocks before finally sinking into the mountain, no longer visible. Everyone paled in shock, and then felt outraged. This was the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, where Lord Huai Jian had attained Tao, and would be one of the sacred lands of the future, yet what was it now? Lord Huai Jian had not even officially established his own faction, and his mountain was already damaged, though it was not very serious. This was a grave act of blasphemy. Chapter 2766, 2766 Tea-Serving Maid. 2766 Tea-Serving Maid. What great insolence! Everyone whispered among themselves. Most of the cultivators of the foreign realm tended to be fiercer than the people of the celestial realm. They all set their eyes on Ling Han and company, looking menacing. Lord Huai Jian has broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, and this is a matter that should be celebrated by all, yet you people actually dare to come and cause trouble? Don't think that you are invincible just because you are an 18th Lotus. Some people stepped out, sneering. It was not just one. In the blink of an eye, 7 18th Lotus elites had appeared, surrounding Ling Han and the others. The pride and authority of a Heavenly Venerate could not permit offense. "Surrender, and don't resist arrest," an 18th Lotus elite demanded. With his insight, he naturally could tell with a glance that only bewitching Maiden Ro had attained the 18th Lotus out of this whole group. The others were only in the 10th Lotus. In fact, there were 2 of them that had not even reached the 10th Lotus. That naturally was Ling Han and the Empress. That was because one of them was a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, while the other was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. They had both left the range of Celestial King tier, and returned to the basics. 1. Bewitching Maiden Ro crossed her arms. Come battle me, then. She took the initiative to charge out. Shua. A whip appeared in her grip, and she lashed out at the 7 great 18th Lotus elites. This whip was a celestial tool which Ling Han had made for her. After so many years had passed, the amount of divine metal in Ling Han's possession was also astonishing. There was enough to allow the women to not only have one each, but in fact, what they were wearing could also be made from divine metal, having high stats in both attack and defense. Thus, the bewitching Maiden Ro charged out without any fear. To say the least, even if she did not have this whole set, wasn't there still Ling Han and the Empress backing her up? Ancestral weapon. These 18th Lotus elites all humphed, and they summoned their own celestial tools as well. Having reached a level equivalent to the 9th heaven, how could they possibly have been unable to gain a celestial tool? Ding, ding. Dang, dang. The 8 of them fought intensely. Being able to advance to the 9th heaven, especially in a low-level dimension, all of them were definitely supreme prodigies, so not only did the bewitching Maiden Ro not get the upper hand, she was being suppressed instead. However, these 18th Lotus elites very soon discovered, much to their dismay, that their opponent actually had another celestial tool as armor on her, and there were extremely high-level seals flickering on it at that. It possessed astonishingly strong defense. These were seals that Ling Han had inscribed. They possessed a portion of the might of the indestructible heaven scroll, and combined with the power of divine metal, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not penetrate this defense. The disadvantage was that these seals weren't permanent. Once in a while, they would have to be drawn anew. If this was another Heavenly Venerate, who would do such a thing? Wasn't it too troublesome? But Ling Han was unconcerned. If not spending time on his wife, then what would he be spending time on? Bewitching Maiden Ro did not have to worry about defense at all. She only had to continuously attack. This gave her too much of an advantage. She only had to attack and forget defense entirely, which was extremely impressive. However, though the 7 great 18th Lotus elites could not capture the bewitching Maiden Ro, it was no issue for them to ensure their own safety. After all, their battle prowess was not inferior to the bewitching Maiden Ro's, what more when the 7 of them were all working together. As bewitching Maiden Ro gave a soft shout, lightning flickered on her body. Z. Very quickly, 9-colored divine light condensed on the body of the whip. 5 elements lightning technique. This was a Heavenly Venerate technique, and she could only use it a few times. This was still due to the fact that she had the protection of the precious suit of armor she was wearing, so she could sustain attacks head-on. Otherwise, she would not dare to gather power for a powerful move while she was being ganged up on by 7 great elites either. But once the powerful move was used, her battle prowess also soared high with a crackle. Pung! 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 Wherever the whip swept past, its power could not be matched. So what if there were 7 great elites? In an instant, they were all in shambles, none of them daring to face the whip's power head-on. This was a Heavenly Venerate technique, and with how difficult it was to pass on, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not possibly learn it, if he did not have a Heavenly Venerate for a master or father. The spectators were all dumbfounded. The 7 supreme elites were actually unable to subdue this woman? Heavens, could it be that she was a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate? Step back. A feminine voice filled with authority rang out, allowing no refusal. The 7 great elites all held their breaths, and stepped aside. A woman walked out from the mountains. She was treading on air as she came towards them. There was no iridescent light wrapped around her, but she exuded an air that would cause one to tremble. She was of the angel race, with 2 massive white wings sprouting from her back. She had a golden halo above her head, and was astonishingly beautiful. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed slightly. This was an old friend, Jing Zhongyue. When he had used the power of the Black Tower to begin a massacre at the Divine Desolate Mountain, only Huai Jian and Jing Zhongyue possessed precious tools protecting them because they were favored by the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity, and thus managed to escape. After so many years, Huai Jian had become a Heavenly Venerate, and this woman had actually become a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate as well. Greetings, milady. The 7 great elites all knelt, paying their respects to Jing Zhongyue. There were some among them who were even a good number of times older than Jing Zhongyue, but age was never a factor on the path of cultivation. The only things that mattered were cultivation level and strength. Jing Zhongyue nodded. With her feet bare and snow-white skin, she exuded an air of purity. Even if the demon race hated the angel race, they had to admit that she was a beauty that would enchant even them. Jing Zhongyue glanced at Bewitching Maiden Ro, and coldly demanded, "Who are you?" Bewitching Maiden Ro chuckled, and said, "Little girl, you are quite pretty. How about becoming a tea-serving maid for my husband?" Upon hearing this, a wave of commotion spread through the crowd. Insolent, this was too insolent. To actually dare ask a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate to become a maid? Whether it was to serve tea or warm the bed, it was still a great insult. In the entire world, the Heavenly Venerable tier was the strongest. Who could insult a Heavenly Venerate? Everyone was outraged, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han to pieces. When Ling Han saw how everyone's eyes were focused on him, he couldn't help but exclaim about his innocence mentally. It was not he who said this, so why were they targeting him? Jing Zhongyue was also cold. Initially, I only wanted to pass a light punishment on you, seeing as it was not easy for you to attain the 18th lotus, but you insist on courting your own death. She moved, and grabbed out at the Bewitching Maiden Ro. It was naturally impossible that Bewitching Maiden Ro would be a worthy match for a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Thus, she hurriedly called out, "Sister Wanxing, help!" Pang! The Empress moved, and Jing Zhongyue was very casually sent flying with a wave of the former's jade-like palm, breaking through countless mountain rocks on her course, and finally sinking into the body of the Mountain of 10,000 Swords. The Empress' hand was much heavier than the Bewitching Maiden Ro's, and Jing Zhongyue, as a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, could withstand the impact too, so she directly created a hole with the collision that she had with the Mountain of 10,000 Swords. This. Everyone was rendered speechless. This was actually a Heavenly Venerate. It was said that a Heavenly Venerate could not be insulted. Then since dirty water could not be poured on Huai Jian, how could this one condone the same thing? You people wish to capture those close to her and punish them at the slightest provocation. What position did that place the pride and authority of this Heavenly Venerate? When has such a powerful friend appeared in our dimension? Amidst laughter, a considerable number of figures shot downwards from the Mountain of 10,000 Swords. When everyone saw this, they hurriedly bowed in greeting. Greetings, Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. Greetings, Heavenly Venerate Jian. Greetings, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Spring. Greetings, Heavenly Venerate Huai Jian. 4 Heavenly Venerates had appeared together. This party was too powerful. Any single one of them possessed strength capable of conquering the whole world. The 4 great Heavenly Venerates all stood with their arms crossed behind their backs, while their eyes were set upon the Empress. The Empress could not be bothered to maintain the disguise, and immediately revealed her true appearance. What? This is actually a human girl. Hasn't the celestial realm long since called a ceasefire with us? Why has a Heavenly Venerate suddenly come here? This is probably a newly promoted one. It is said that there are already no Heavenly Venerates standing guard over at the celestial realm. Everyone exclaimed in shock, feeling extremely flabbergasted. Who exactly are you? Huai Jian demanded. After his advance to the Heavenly Venerable tier, his aura had become increasingly steady and stable. Chapter 2767, 2767 Shout that caused heaven's might to retreat. 2767 Shout that caused heaven's might to retreat. Ling Han chuckled, similarly removed his disguise, took a step forward, and asked, Huai Jian, do you still recognize me? You? Huai Jian stared at Ling Han for a while, and then his eyes suddenly lit up. It's you. On the side, the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity also recognized Ling Han, and couldn't help feeling furious. At that time, if it weren't for Ling Han who had released Heavenly Venerate Wu Lu, the Desolate Eternity might have advanced to the position of second-tier Heavenly Venerate and become the strongest legend. However, due to the damage sustained at that time, he had fallen short of success at the final step, and all his previous efforts had gone to waste. For the past one epoch, he hadn't made any progress at all. Ling Han nodded. It's been a long time. His current structure had since improved exponentially by many times, and he had long since ceased to take Huai Jian to heart. Good. 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 Huai Jian sneered. Back then, you used a Heavenly Venerate tool to commit crimes. Now, let's see how you can escape this time. Although Ling Han's side also had a Heavenly Venerate, there were a total of 4 on their side. The most important thing was that this was their world, where the Empress would be suppressed by the power of the dimension, and furthermore would be unable to extract the local unique power. As long as there was enough time, the power within the Empress body would be exhausted, and she would be easily suppressed. Unfortunately, he couldn't have imagined that the Empress had also condensed a core of power, so she didn't have to worry about running out of power, and her power had reached the level of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. She alone was capable of conquering this whole dimension. Ling Han was even more terrifying, having the strength of a third-tier Heavenly Venerate. Humph. The Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity directly moved. He was a veteran Heavenly Venerate, and was also the strongest in this dimension. There was scarcely anyone like him, so there was no need for him to have any scruples in doing things. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's big hand was slapped away. Having finally met again, we should be catching up with one another. What's the hurry? With this movement, everyone was once again dumbfounded. What was going on? That was a Heavenly Venerate who had just made a move, but he was slapped away like a mosquito in such a relaxed manner? How could this be believed? Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly Venerates Huai Jian, Yellow Spring, and Qi Yan all frowned. Their insight was fine, and yet this made them frown. How could a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate be so powerful? It wasn't as if they had gone to the celestial realm, and had been suppressed by the power of heaven and earth there. In that case, it wouldn't be surprising if they could only unleash the battle prowess of pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier. A strange junior. Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's eyes revealed an ominous glint. They had all been warned by Zhou Heng, who forbade them from entering the celestial realm for the rest of their lives, so they had never been able to cause trouble for Ling Han. Now that Ling Han had delivered himself, the Desolate Eternity actually couldn't do anything about it. His chest was slightly bulging, and the pitch-black single horn on his head was shining as he was gathering power for a powerful attack. For a Heavenly Venerate, this was astonishingly fast. Soon, he would have completed building his power, and could immediately strike against Ling Han. Back then, Ling Han had been able to contend against Huai Jian. Presently, Huai Jian had attained the position of Heavenly Venerate, whilst Ling Han having become a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate was actually quite normal, and he shouldn't be underestimated. Boom! The Desolate Eternity swooped forward with supreme power. This was an all-out effort, which made even the heaven and earth tremble. The Empress took a step forward, shielding Ling Han's body with her own, and then sent out a palm strike towards Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. Pang! Sure enough, the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity was sent flying, and he slammed into the mountain of 10,000 swords, which collapsed to pieces instantly. However, Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's body did not stop there, but continued to fly towards the sky. Soon, he turned into a little black dot, and could no longer be seen. Everyone lost their voice, and simply felt chills all over their body. A dignified Heavenly Venerate was actually removed by a mere slap. Heavens, what kind of freakishness did this couple possess? The Heavenly Venerates Huai Jian, Yellow Spring, and Qi Yen were too shocked to speak. Although each Heavenly Venerate was a top-notch genius of the world, they had to admit that Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity was the strongest among them. But the strongest one had been sent flying with a mere slap from the Empress. What kind of huge gap in strength was this? So what if they were all Heavenly Venerates? They had all gone numb with shock, and they felt a chill in their limbs. Ling Han smiled lightly. It's okay. I'm just here to watch the fun today, since I'm passing by, to see how some old friends are doing. How could Huai Jian and the other great Heavenly Venerates believe this? At that time, the foreign realm had almost wiped out the celestial realm. If it weren't for the numerous occurrences of miracles, the current celestial realm would have been swallowed up and fused with the foreign realm by now. Now that the celestial realm had produced an incomparable elite, would he let them off the hook? They quickly sent out a wave of divine sense, summoning more powerful elites, with the intention to besiege the Empress together. After all, this was under the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, and the stronger she was, the more she would be suppressed by the heaven and earth here. Sure enough, the Empress's move had triggered targeted attacks against her by the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, and heavenly tribulation continued to descend endlessly. She didn't care at all. When this kind of attack hit her body, she didn't even feel much. Furthermore, she wasn't afraid that the foreign realm would cut her off from extracting power, as she hadn't extracted any power from here at all. A first-tier Heavenly Venerate was still unable to extract the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world. It was just that the Empress had also become annoyed with being continuously attacked. Wouldn't anyone else be vexed as well? Seeing this, Ling Han squeezed the Empress' hand, and said to the heaven and earth, "If you still don't retreat, do you want me to cripple you?" He released a raging aura, aimed directly towards the heaven and earth. Immediately, the lightning and thunder that had obscured the whole sky disappeared without a trace. Fuck, the heaven and earth could also be scared away. Huai Jian and the others felt a chill rise up from their limbs. Even they were unwilling to become enemies of the heaven and earth, as the source of their power was after all the unique power of the foreign realm. Once they left this world, they could only be regarded as pseudo-heavenly venerates, and they would only expend their power whilst not being able to absorb any. Their battle prowess would also drop. However, as soon as Ling Han shouted, the heavenly tribulation simply retreated. What kind of power was this? The Empress was already strong enough, but judging from the look of things now, it was clear that Ling Han was even more terrifying. What had happened to the celestial realm to have produced 2 monsters like this? Ling Han spread out his hands. Now, can we catch up on the past? As his words fell, Xiao, 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 he saw 9 Heavenly Venerates arriving together. Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity and Jing Zhongyue also came back, both looking disheveled. In an instant, there appeared 13 Heavenly Venerates and 1 pseudo-Heavenly Venerate in this place. This kind of lineup was extremely powerful, and it also proved that the foreign realm was in its golden era because Ling Han had traveled to many low-level dimensions before, and there were not even this many elites there. Does the celestial realm want to restart the war? Heavenly Venerate Yellow Spring asked. Behind him, there was a river of death rushing straight into the heavens. This was his Tao, and those who touched it would die. If Zhou Heng hadn't stepped forward, the celestial realm would have been destroyed. Unexpectedly, after only 1 epoch, it was the celestial realm's turn to turn around and invade the foreign realm. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. I don't represent the celestial realm. Okay, I won't be joking around with you guys anymore. His structure had gotten bigger, and the grievances of the past had also been swept into a forgotten corner by him. He merely sighed. He neither talked about hysteria, nor thought about taking these people to the flaming frost realm. After all, the two dimensions had been enemies for generations, and it was unknown how many people had died because of it. Ling Han had yet to become noble enough to repay grievances with kindness. He sat for a while, and then set off. This was also a warning so that these people would not think that Zhou had long forgotten this place after the passing of one epoch. There was still Ling Han. After Ling Han left, all the great heavenly venerates of the foreign realm were relatively silent. Indeed, Zhou warning had been already an epoch ago, and he had never reappeared, which caused some heavenly venerates to become restless, wanting to restart the war. Fortunately, Ling Han came in time, otherwise, wouldn't they all be killed if they had really started the war? Chapter 2768, 2768 Return to the Celestial Realm. 2768 Return to the Celestial Realm. Ling Han and others soon came to the two-realm passageway. There was a seal left by Zhou here. It wasn't very powerful, but functioned as a serious warning. It was laid by a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. Who would dare to cross over this drawn line? Ling Han stretched out his hand, and pressed it on the seal. A flicker of divine sense stirred, and the seal instantly combusted on its own and disappeared. Let's go. They entered the two-realm passageway. Although there had been a surging tide of energy here at the beginning, it had naturally calmed down by now. It was now serene without so much as a ripple here. Very quickly, the group passed through. Although the war had subsided, as the saying went, once bitten, twice shy. Furthermore, how long had foreign realm been fighting against the celestial realm? About 20 to 30 epochs. Therefore, even if the war had fizzled out, there were still guards here. Who's there? Seeing someone coming from the two-realm passageway, the 7 guards who were of the ascending origin tier immediately shouted, raising their weapons one by one. Hit by the familiar smell, Ling Han raised his head to look up at the sky. Although the aura here was the weakest among all the dimensions that he had traveled, it made him feel the most amiable. He really felt like he was back home. It was just unfortunate that the heaven and the earth immediately reacted. Clang! A flash of lightning appeared, slashing violently towards Ling Han and the Empress. This was the weakest dimension in the entire Genesis world, and the heaven and earth here had the least tolerance for transcenders, so when a heavenly venerate and pseudo-heavenly venerate openly walked about, they would be targeted. Seeing this scene, the guards of Ascension Origin tier were all shocked. They couldn't see through the cultivation level of Ling Han's group, but it didn't matter. Wasn't it clear from the fact that the heavenly tribulation unleashed its divine might? With such mighty power, if any of them was even struck lightly, they would be turned to dust. They rushed to issue a warning. This was far beyond what they could handle. The Empress became furious. Couldn't they get over this already? She glared at the sky angrily, filled with the urge to exterminate it. Let's go, Ling Han said with a smile, stretching out his hand to take hold of everyone. Xiao! All of them disappeared. The first stop was to find the core of the dimension. This was a piece of cake for them, and they very quickly found the place. Ling Han simply stretched out his hand to probe it, and the unique power of the celestial realm was extracted by him and fused into one of his cells. Furthermore, Ling Han also gave a slight threat, and the heaven and earth naturally dared not target him and the Empress again. They exited, and went to look for their parents and various friends. With Ling Han leading the way, they arrived at their destination almost immediately. An epoch had passed, and this place had changed a lot. Originally, it had been just a barren hill, but later developed into a market, then a small town, and finally a huge city now. Ling City. Everyone looked at the 2 big characters on the city gate. At a glance, one could see that these were carved by an elite, exuding an air of boundless deterrence. Ling Han couldn't help smiling. This is the handwriting of elder brother. He nodded. When elder brother wrote these 2 words, he should have been a 3rd heaven celestial king, but I'm not sure how he is doing now. They entered the city, and paid a star stone as a fee for entering the city. Due to such a long time passing, there were so many changes here that it was overwhelming, so they didn't go directly to seek out Feng Peyun and the others, and instead went to find an inn first, where they ate and drank while making queries about the current situation. Soon, Ling Han had it figured out. The city was now divided into 3 factions, the Chen clan, the Feng clan, and the Murong clan, who jointly controlled Ling City. The Chen clan was of course Ling Han's younger sister Ling Yuan's lineage, as her husband was surnamed Cheng. Now their children had grandchildren, the grandchildren had children, and this continued on for who knew how many generations, so now they had many descendants. The Feng clan was the descendants of Feng Poyan. Unexpectedly this elder brother had found himself a wife and had children. Meanwhile, the Murong clan was of course the descendants of Murong Qing. The 3 major forces each had a large number of members, but there was no unity among them. Instead, they were fighting for power, causing the relationship among the 3 to become extremely strained. Ling Han couldn't help shaking his head. This had certainly not been Feng Poyan's and Murong Qing's original intention. However, after the line had continued for countless generations, the friendship would of course fade away. He inquired about it, and true enough, both Feng Poyan and Murong Qing were cultivating in seclusion. It was said that they were already 6th heaven celestial kings, and were aiming to break through to the 7th heaven. They hadn't shown up for tens of millions of years. Hence, their descendants began to have disputes. Ling Han shook his head. This was a common problem of all major clans. No matter how great the first generation was when they established a clan, when the line continued for generations, the future generations would gradually deteriorate. Big news! Big news, someone suddenly shouted. I just got the news that the Feng clan and the Murong clan are going all out in battle. What's going on? Everyone asked, alarmed. 2 major clans were going all out in battle. Were they not afraid that the Chen clan would pick up the spoils? I heard that it was due to a blood ginseng, which is a superb celestial medicine that can help an ascending origin tier become a celestial king, said the man. Gasp! Everyone gasped. How astonishing was it to have a celestial king produced out of thin air. The Feng clan and the Murong clan might each have a 6th heaven celestial king, but beneath them, the 2 clans had only 1 celestial king respectively. Furthermore, they were still 1st heaven celestial kings, so the significance of having 1 more celestial king than the other was great indeed, as it could give the clan an overwhelming advantage over the other. Why did the 2 clans ignore the Chen clan? This was because the Chen clan didn't even have 1 celestial king. Precisely due to this, it had always been a big mystery that the 3 major clans could stand side by side, because no matter how one would think about it, the Chen clan didn't have such qualifications. Now that a blood ginseng could help one of ascending origin tier break through to become a celestial king, this naturally made the 2 clans become covetous, and in any case, they didn't need to care about the Chen clan anyway. After Heavenborn came into being, the celestial path had slowly disappeared. Now, there was no need for someone of the ascending origin tier to go through the celestial path to break through to become a celestial king. Things had gone back to how it had been in the ancient times. Ling Han immediately turned around and stood up. The descendants of Feng Peyun and Murong Qing were no different from his own descendants. No matter how unworthy the descendants were, he couldn't stand by and watch them kill each other. They came to the residence of the Feng clan. In the fight for the blood ginseng, the Feng clan had temporarily gained the upper hand, and managed to snatch the blood ginseng. However, Murong clan's elites had blocked the pathway and surrounded the Feng clan. They wanted the Feng clan to hand over the blood ginseng, or they would face each other in battle. Both sides had dispatched elites. It was a situation wherein a battle could happen at any moment. Ling Han strode forward and walked into the crowd. Who are you? When the people on both sides saw the appearance of someone unrelated, they all turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. Your ancestors and I are brothers. Stop fighting. Being a family and yet engaging in internal strife, do you want others to see all of you make fools of yourselves? Seeing Ling Han's aged and experienced attitude, everyone became furious. How dared you, an ordinary-looking guy, pretend to be their elder? So what now? You say you are the brother of our ancestors, and expect us to address you as ancestor? Where did this madman come from? Hurry up and drive him away. Immediately, someone stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head, stretched out his hands, and the heaven and earth instantly reacted. Infinite spiritual qi gathered, and hundreds of ginseng plants could be seen to be growing out of thin air from the ground, growing stronger at a visible speed, and the roots exposed on the ground were as red as blood. Be blood ginseng, everyone exclaimed, and the person who made a move against Ling Han also stopped in his tracks. Currently, Ling Han was forcibly extracting the power of the heaven and earth to create the celestial medicine and make it grow rapidly. This was a heaven-defying act, but unfortunately, the current celestial realm wasn't as powerful as Ling Han, so it could only be pushed around by him. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.